And this was the submission made to you by Mr. Wakeford.
Yes.
On a correct assessment of the allegations, the main issues in dispute in respect of the allegations made against me and within the mandate of the Commission are correctly identified as. So, Mr. Chairman, I'm reading it it's written in first person, it's his affidavit.
That's fine, yeah, that's fine.
The first, Mr. Chairman, is whether Mr. George Papadakis resolved a major tax investigation at Sars between 10 March 2008, when Papadakis was first employed at Sars, and 26 February 2009, when the first order of cement is alleged to have been placed with W.G. Wern for delivery to Meyersdale Eco Estate. Second major issue is whether I influenced the Department of Home Affairs to extend the initial Lindela contract between Bosasa and the Department of Home Affairs beyond the 10-year period ending 31 October 2015, or extend other financial benefits embodied in the addendums relative to the initial contract. The secondary issues in dispute can be summarized as whether payments of 100,000 Rand per month were paid to me as a fee for providing services in relation to the particular SARS investigation that Papadakis is alleged to have resolved at SARS between 10 March 2008 and February 2009, or as catch-up payments of my monthly consultancy fee of 57,000 Rand, including VAT, per month, as I say they were. The next secondary issue, whether cement to the value of 600,000 Rand was provided by Bosasa to Papadakis in exchange for him influencing the alleged major SARS investigation in between 2008 and 26 February 2009. And then thirdly, whether payments were made by Bosasa to Anil Radhakrishna in exchange for him awarding Bosasa with a 5-year extension to the initial Lindela in 2002, for your benefit, Mr. Chairman, proceeds to deal with the basis on which it was submitted to you by Mr. Wakeford, that the evidence in the Commission's possession on the main issues in dispute can immediately be dispensed with, and then it's listed. And then in 2003, the evidence in the possession of the Commission, on the basis of which the secondary issues can be disposed of.
Good afternoon, Mr. Agrizzi.
Good afternoon, Chair. Nice to see you again, CJ.
No, it's good to see you. It's good to see you again. Thank you very much. But I must thank you for availing yourself. And understand that your health hasn't been very good, but
we had to tell the truth as we did 2019.
Mr. Agrizzi's counsel wants to address me.
Good afternoon, Chair.
Good afternoon.
Advocate Wits, instructed by Wits Incorporated,
yes.
Before representing Mr. Agrizzi, and I'm also representing Mr. Forster. There was an application as well granted to cross-examine Mr. Forster.
Yes.
I did bring it to the attention of the team leader and the evidence leader, Advocate Victoria Senior Counsel, that unfortunately Mr. Forster is going around in the world and in the Republic of South Africa. He's been severely affected with the COVID-19. He's in the ICU unit. I did also tell my learned friend, Advocate Willis, SC,
yes.
that this is a position. I've got a medical certificate from the specialist physician.
Yes.
So unfortunately, the position that he's in,
yes.
In ICU at the moment on a ventilator, he's not in any position to
yes.
attend. He would have wanted to attend.
Yes.
And I've also got a full medical certificate from the specialist physician pulmonologist who's been dealing with Mr. Agrizzi in the 59 days that he was in critical and in high care at the hospital, together with the daily medication that he takes.
Yes.
And I've just been requested, and I have informed as well my learned friends, just to give him a little bit of opportunity because of the fact that he's surviving on oxygen, which he's got connected to him.
Yes.
So he does get a bit tired at times,
yes.
just to give him that opportunity. And then the other important aspect, we did make our submissions when Advocate Notchwe, Senior Counsel, was dealing with the evidence. Advocate Pretorius and his legal team, Advocate September, were not present. And you gave us certain time limits, correctly so, because the liquidators had then intervened and they then approached, and everybody made their submissions. And by agreement between Advocate Notcher, Advocate Willis, myself, as well as Advocate Luderitz from the liquidators, what we then did was, in terms of the time limits that you gave us, we made all our submissions. So we did make submissions as well on behalf of Mr. Agrizzi. I was the one who actually objected to the Section 417 evidence,
Yes.
which somehow or another, we don't need to deal with it at this stage, found its way into the affidavits of Mr. Wakeford, who was not a party to the 417 inquiry. There's an obvious reason for that, but we don't need to deal with it at this stage. But the importance is, there have already been 2 rulings by retired Judge Joffe in relation to this, 2 court rulings in the 417, or 2 rulings in the 417, specifically stating that he's giving it to Mr. Jared Watson and he's not to use it via any other party or do anything untoward with it, and somehow or another it managed to slip its way in, surreptitiously or in some other way, into this replying affidavit and into the evidence of Mr. Wakeford. We immediately put a stop to it, and that is why, with respect, Chair, you then took the point and said, look, let me hear argument, let me see submissions, and I'll make the ruling. So just to place it on record, if my learned friend, on behalf of Mr. Wakeford, intends to try in any way bring anything in through the 417 up and until a ruling is made, there's already been 2 rulings, which Mr. Watson, who is present here at the inquiry, where he's fully entitled to be present, I've got no problem or issue with that at all.
No, I don't think counsel for Mr. Wakeford will try and do anything that shouldn't be done until I've made a ruling.
No, I'm sure. I know, Reg, we go back many, many years,
Yes,
colleagues and friends, but just in case, so that I don't want to necessarily delay the proceedings and object, but just to know that if anything does come, there will be an objection on behalf of Mr. Agrizzi. So that really deals with that, and I'm more than happy that if we can proceed. Thank you very much, Chair.
Thank you. Mr. Agrizzi, if at any stage you wish us to take a break, please just indicate or let me know.
I will do, Chair.
Okay.
I will do.
Okay.
But the advocate Wits doesn't tell you is I can still outthink him. He might outrun me, but I can outthink him.
The cross-examination may start.
Mr. Agrizzi, I hope you can't out-talk him, Mr. Wits, that is.
Sure. I'm sure there's no one that can.
Yes, please administer the oath of affirmation. Thank you, Registrar.
Please state your full names for the record.
My name is Angelo Agrizzi.
Do you have any objection to taking the prescribed oath? Do you
None.
consider the oath binding on your conscience?
I do.
Do you solemnly swear that the evidence you will give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? If so, please raise your right hand and say, so help me God.
Help me, God.
Thank you, Mr. Agrizzi.
Thank you, Chair.
You may proceed.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Agrizzi, you'll forgive me, I won't always be looking directly at you because we don't have the benefit of being in person, but I will try and find the camera every now and then. Mr. Agrizzi, I'm going to try not to turn to documents. You're privy to all the documentation that I am going to refer you to, but if there's something you do want me to go to, please let me know, and I can take you straight there. But
Advocate Willis, let's refer to the documents. You turn me to the documents so I can see and refresh my memory.
very well. Go
You would
to
understand,
page.
I was skewed for quite some time.
Let's go to bundle 4A, page 954. Now, there was some history to your coming and giving evidence. Mr. Agrizzi, in the left-hand column, you'll see the number 10, which is the 10th line on the page.
Yes.
I'm going to read that to you. It's the words of Mr. Pretorius. Now, before dealing specifically with 2 issues, Chair, which I must deal with before the witness testifies, we must emphasize that we approach the evidence with caution. The evidence could, in theory at least, be entirely fabricated. It could be exaggerated or distorted. It could be motivated by improper motives, or it could be reliable and true and correct in part, material part, or as a whole. I want to ask you, Mr. Agrizzi, you've given evidence over a lengthy period of time in respect of numerous peoples. I'm only interested, really, in what you said concerning Mr. Wakeford. And is it possible that in respect of Mr. Wakeford, and then there are the others you implicate, Mr. Papadakis, Mr. Radhakrishna, that given the passage of time you've made mistakes or you've remembered things incorrectly? Is that possible? Yes
Chair,
or no is a good enough question.
Sorry,
Answer.
Chair, I'm answering you. Sorry, Mr. Advocate Willis, explain to me what you were asking again, please.
Is it possible, in all the evidence you've given, whether on affidavit or orally before this commission concerning Mr. Wakeford, and then there are two other persons, Mr. Papadakis and Mr. Radhakrishna, that you've made mistakes or you've remembered things incorrectly?
What kind of mistakes?
I don't know. We'll have to discover what they are. But is it possible that your evidence is fallible in some respects? Yes or no?
So the question, if I can put,
yes or no.
let me put it to you, Mr. Agrizzi. What counsel is asking is whether it's possible that maybe some of the things you have said about Mr. Wakeford and maybe about Mr. Papadakis, in saying those things, maybe you made a mistake, you didn't remember correctly, you were mistaken. He's asking whether that might be the case in respect of at least some of the things you have said.
Chairperson, I understand the question fully.
Yes.
But the problem I have, I can't just answer it yes or no to the Advocate Willis.
You would like to be referred to specific allegations?
Yes.
So you're not prepared to make a concession that you're only human and you might be fallible?
I can't answer a question yes or no. I am fallible, but in terms of the documentation and the testimony I gave, I can't say yes or no. You can't ask a question like that, Advocate Willis. You've got to be specific. You can't generalize and say, well, I could have made a lot of mistakes. Well, I couldn't have. You can't just ask. It's impossible to ask a person a yes or a no question in this type of environment. Do you understand what I'm saying?
I don't understand what you're saying, but let's leave that there. So, in other words,
could I put a yes or no question to you, Mr. Willis?
No, you don't get to ask me questions, Mr. Agrizzi.
Hang on, Mr. Agrizzi.
Please don't.
We have to make sure that when Mr. Wills asks questions, you listen, and when you give an answer, he will listen, and we will listen, and he will then continue.
Mr. Agrizzi, the point is you stand by all your evidence that you've given, do you?
Do you want me to explain to you what I'm standing by?
All the evidence that you've given in affidavits and orally before the Commissioner in relation to Mr. Wakeford, and then the two other persons, Mr. Papadakis and Mr. Radhakrishna. You stand by all that evidence, yes or no?
I can't answer yes or no questions, Mr. Willis.
Is there a reason you don't stand by it?
No, there's a reason why I cannot answer a yes or no question.
What is that
simple
reason?
I can give you context. Well, you can't ask people yes or no questions.
I'm going to be asking you many questions to which the answer is yes or no. Are you telling me now you're not going to be answering the question?
Can I give you a simple example why I say so? Through you, Chairperson.
Let me put the question this way. Out of all the evidence you have given with reference to Mr. Wakeford, whether in your affidavit or affidavits or orally, are there any aspects of that evidence that you are now aware of may have been based on mistakes, may not be true? Maybe when you gave them, you thought they were true, but since then, you have come to realize that they may not be true or were not true, you had made a mistake. Are there any such aspects?
In the terms of the aspects, Chair, you asked me the right question. In terms of the aspects, there might have been a date or time wrong, but in terms of the context, was there corrupt relationships? I never faltered once. I did not lie once. I told the truth. But yes, in terms of dates and that, I could very well have made a mistake.
Well, dates are going to be very important in this cross-examination. So would you consider that possibly dates could change the context?
No, I don't consider that dates could change the context in any way. At the end of the day, a date has got nothing to do with whether a person received anything in gratification from the Sars.
Now, you know precisely what Mr. Wakeford's version is for the following reasons. Firstly, he set his version out in an application. There were numerous affidavits. You deposed to some of them. His version was set out in his, of course, in the application where he sought from the learned chairman leave to cross-examine you and to give evidence. So that was the first series of affidavits. He then gave evidence before this commission on the 6th of May, on which occasion he placed before the chairman an evidence affidavit. That was some 6 weeks ago. So and of course he gave evidence before the chairman, and I suspect that you would have been watching him giving that evidence. So you know precisely what his evidence is and what his version is.
Willis, I turned off the broadcast, the television, when he started denigrating me and making assumptions, wild accusations about the fourth and fifth column. I decided that we're not in a Star Wars thing, and I wasn't prepared to listen to any further. So you're going to have to refer me to the actual file where I can refer to it. Give an example, very simply. You can't go and say, I was saying certain things at the Silver Star Casino when I actually wasn't even at the Silver Star Casino. I was actually off sick. So that's why I switched off the TV. So I can't refer to the evidence that he gave me over TV. I'm sorry. You'll have to refer me to the paper.
I take it from that, and I put it to you, that his evidence left you feeling very uncomfortable. And that's why you switched it off.
I switched it off because he was carrying on like a lunatic, claiming third and fourth columns and all these funny things, economic sabotage and all this. In the one breath, he said what a great company Sars was, and in the next breath he said that I was the de facto CEO, which I was not. So I couldn't understand what he was saying, and I switched off the TV. Not because I was upset with him. I've got nothing against Kevin Wakeford. He's a nice guy. But the problem I have was the fact that he didn't tell the truth while he was in front of the commission. That's why I switched off the TV. That's the truth. Why did it?
Yes, the evidence you're referring to is where he referred to you and certain others, which he also called a cabal, as being the fifth column which sought to destroy Bosasa if they could not hijack it first. That's the evidence you're referring to. Is that correct?
You see, that is totally incorrect. The evidence that he was referring to, the offer that we did to purchase some part of the company from Bosasa as a transaction that was transparent and totally innocent. That was what he was referring to. But let me explain to you that he turned it around to make it sound as though there was a cabal. It wasn't a cabal. The fact of the matter remains very simply, Mr. Willis, if you can prove to me I was lying about a Neil Krishna getting money via distinctive wine, or Mr. George Papadakis getting cement from Bosasa, if you can show me they did not get that cement. They did not. He even admitted they got the cement. What must I say?
You've also had regard to the affidavits by Mr. Papadakis and Mr. Radhakrishna, have you not?
Yes, I have. I've had a look at them.
Thank you. Then I take it you're fully prepared for today's cross-examination. Would that, can you give me a yes or a no to that?
Documents, Chair, with all due respect, I got the documents late yesterday. I started reviewing them. I can only do so much in a day. I only got through some of it. I do know about it, but as I said, I spent 52 days and I'm still recuperating. It's taking time for me to get to things. My abilities aren't like they used to be.
I don't mean to be facetious, but you said to us a while ago you can outthink your counsel.
I can outthink many bits, all right? And it doesn't mean to say that I'm any sharper now. I was much sharper 10 months, 12 months ago before this was done to me, Mr. Advocate Willis. Much sharper.
So,
which is why I said to you, I can't answer yes or no questions.
You claim to be a whistleblower, so that's a yes, is it?
I prefer not to call the whistleblower.
So is it a yes or a no? Is it a yes or a no, Mr. Agrizzi?
I said I prefer to be not to be called a whistleblower.
Is that because you don't fit within the true description of a whistleblower?
No, that is not because I do not fit in the true description of a whistleblower. It's because, simply put, I realized after reading a book by a lady who's with a trillion, Musila Matepu, that the stories that we go around telling people that we are whistleblowers is actually incorrect.
You came before this commission and gave your evidence under circumstances where you put yourself forward as a whistleblower whose life was in danger. It stood to be taken from you by someone else, in other words, murder. And on that basis, the rights of many people, the rights before this commission to be given a notice in terms of Rule 3.3, were denied them. So you came before this commission under the guise of a whistleblower. Now you're not a whistleblower, or you don't want to be known as a whistleblower.
Advocate Willis, you're misconstruing what I'm telling you. I said to you after reading a book by Musila Matepu, right? She made a comment very clearly. She says, we are not whistleblowers. We are actually heroes. We are the ones who expose the rot and corruption. and the scoundrel that takes place. And yes, we are left with an aftermath. Not you. You get a salary every month. We don't. We're left with the aftermath. That's why we don't call ourselves whistleblowers anymore. Does that answer your question?
It doesn't, but we'll leave it there. Let the record speak for itself.
Fine. That's fine.
Mr. Agrizzi, I am intrigued by your referencing a book written by someone on which influenced you not to want to call yourself a whistleblower. Which book is that?
Advocate Willis. It's a book by the lady called Motilo Musepu. Unfortunately, I don't have it with me at the moment. It's in my bedroom.
And when did you read that book? When did you come to this conclusion that you don't want to be known as a whistleblower?
I was very fortunate to share a platform with her, which she couldn't unfortunately attend, which was about a month ago, 2 months ago.
Well, let me ask you, maybe you remember this and we don't have to go to the page. You've confessed that you are a racist, is that correct? Yes or no?
Can we go to that page, please?
Well, have you forgotten that confession?
No, I don't, but I want to go to the page.
Did you or did you not confess before the commissioner, or the learned chairman, to be a racist? Yes or no?
I was honest, and I spoke, and I explained to the chairperson exactly what I'd done wrong, and I went and I sought help for that Advocate Willis.
Why don't you just give a yes answer and save us the time, Mr. Agrizzi?
Mr. Willis, I cannot answer any questions yes or no. Can I give you an example why?
Please, we don't need to drag this out, Mr. Agrizzi. You're not prepared to give yes and no answers.
I cannot give you a yes or no answer. Let me give you an example why I can't do it.
Maybe, Mr. Willis, let me take out the word confession. Is it not true, Mr. Agrizzi, that at some stage when you gave evidence before the commission, you did say, you admit that either you were a racist or you had been a racist at some stage? I can't remember whether you spoke in terms of the present tense at that time or you spoke of the past tense as at that time. Did you not admit that?
Chair, I did, and I explained to you exactly how I did it. I said to you, yes, at the time, I was a racist, what I said. And I was deeply sorry for it.
Yes. You said, yes, you admitted, and you explained, and then I didn't hear what you were saying.
Chair, you're 100% correct. Honest at the commission with everything. I came and I said I was a racist for saying what I said, and I'm deeply sorry, and I've made my amends, and I'm still, to today, working on it and working with people that help me every day.
If we go to page 960, Mr. Agrizzi, at line 14, and you're giving an explanation at this point in time. And this is on the 29th of January 2019, day 42 of these proceedings. And in line 14, you say, I've not made an excuse about this, but once again, you say, comma, Chair, comma, I am a racist, I agree. Judge me on that, that is fine. You may play on it. That was said in the present tense, Mr. Agrizzi. Are you saying that you are no longer, or you strive no longer to be a racist, from what you told the chairman a moment ago?
No, I'm no longer a racist.
Well, I'm sorry, just repeat your answer, Mr. Agrizzi.
Mr. Chair, I learned my lesson. I work very closely with Mr. Barney Mokhatla and Mr. Boang Jones from the Human Rights Commission. They have assisted me and they have helped me not to even think of race as a color. I've become aware and worked with them in Alexandra and all over, and I've enjoyed it, Chair. So my answer to Advocate Willis is no. There's no longer even a racist thing in my mind.
But what he's asking you is not whether you are a racist now. He's asking you whether you accept that in terms of the evidence you gave at that time before the commission, you used the present tense that you were a racist then. Do you accept that?
I was a racist when I made that comment, Chair.
Yes, but when you were giving evidence before the commission, do you accept that you used the present tense then?
Correct, Chair.
You
I
accept?
that.
Okay.
So, whether you've made any change or not is not the issue, and I'm not going to debate that with you, Mr. Agrizzi. But as at the 29th of January and before, you were a racist, yes or no?
Chair,
Which year?
can I ask a question for clarity? What has that got to do whether the people were receiving gratitude gifts from the SARSA? This is just trying to put smokes and mirrors over it.
Well, I think in your question, if you can refer to which year, January, which year, I think that's the only thing. Mr. Agrizzi, it's an acceptable question for counsel, for Mr. Wakeford to ask. So he'll just repeat the question, if you could then.
Okay.
I'm going to repeat the entire question. Whether you are a racist today or not is not the issue, and I'm not interested in debating that with you. But as of the 29th of January 2019, when in the present tense you admitted I am a racist, from there going backwards, historically, you were a racist, yes or no?
No.
You were not. So why did you say on the 29th of January, I am a racist, and you said it for the second time at that stage?
Because of what I said. What I said was despicable. But you see, and I've read the affidavits. The affidavit's very clear that they try and paint me to be this person that's a racist when I was at the SARSA. I was there for 20 years.
So let me get to the point, Mr. Agrizzi.
Yes.
You didn't enjoy the evidence of Mr. Wakeford and you switched off. And Mr. Wakeford, dealing historically, talking historically, all the way back to 2006 in his experience of you, he described you as saying despicable things. He described you as a racist in his evidence on the 6th of May. And I want to put it to you, he was quite correct. On your own evidence, he was correct.
That he was not telling the truth. And I'll tell you why. Have a look at the emails. Why would he send me emails to intervene and even look for employment for his daughter if he was such a bad racist and a person? Why would he entertain having meetings with me and discussions with me if I was such a racist? I put it to you, Advocate Willis, that your client may be not honest with you.
Mr. Chairman, this is going to take a long time. I must ask you to warn Mr. Agrizzi not to take things personally, such as I put them to him, and not to put things to me, Mr. Chairman, please.
Whatever he said, other than saying he was putting it to you, maybe we would understand it in a certain way. But I think what all he was saying was, look at ABCD about your client, and based on that, he has a certain view. I think counsel understood what you said when you said you wanted to put something to him in the way in which lawyers use that term. But I think you were saying nothing more than look at the following things that happened, and you think you are saying those things support what you are saying about Mr. Wakeford. But what I can say, Mr. Agrizzi, is that do try to answer questions directly. The shorter the answers, the more progress we will make. But I don't mean by that you mustn't deal with issues properly, all right?
Chair, I've always given my full cooperation.
Yes, thank you. Mr. Wills?
Mr. Agrizzi, the evidence of Mr. Wakeford was that you despise him. And that was the tenor of his evidence, and I want to put it to you. You despise Mr. Wakeford, don't you?
That's not true.
You also despise the late Mr. Gavin Watson, evidently.
Never. I don't despise Mr. Wakeford. I despise what he did. I despise the environment that he created that put us into the situation that we are in today. I despise that. I don't despise Mr. Wakeford. I had tea with Mr. Wakeford. I used to have regular meetings with Mr. Wakeford. We even had tea, and his mom, I remember, still made us. He had a house in Pretoria. We had tea. His mom was there. He gave us tea and toast and Marmite and grated cheese. I still remember it. So that was in 2013. There was no such thing as despising Mr. Wakeford. I don't know where this has come from. It's never been like this. I never ever said a bad thing about Mr. Wakeford.
You despise him now?
No, not at all. Don't despise what happens and what people do. But you can't not love people.
Do you respect the fact that he has a right to defend himself against what you've said?
Yes, he has a right to defend himself, but with the truth.
Well, are you the sole decider on what the truth is, Mr. Agrizzi, or is the chairman?
No, the chair is the decider of what the truth is. All I can do is put facts to the table.
Would you have the chairman believe that you mean, Mr. Wakeford, no harm? You're just speaking the truth. Is that your evidence?
What do you want? I'm telling you as it is. I'm so confused by the fact that Mr. Wakeford is annoyed with me or upset with me, and I hated him. I never hated him. Not at all.
Mr. Agrizzi, you haven't answered my question. Is it your evidence that you mean, Mr. Wakeford, no harm in the allegations you've made? You've just sought to tell the truth.
The allegations I've made are true.
And
They're true. If they harm him, then he needs to rectify. Like I had to fix the issues I had, he needs to fix the issues he has.
So you made your allegations against him some 2 years ago, nearly, and he had to wait nearly 2 years to give his evidence, his side of the story. You accept that he has suffered somewhat in this time. Would that be correct? Without having his day in court, so to speak?
I don't know about suffering or anything like that. I have no contact with the Watsons or with Wakeford. I have no contact with them. So I don't know what you're talking about suffering. I don't worry about, looking around and that. I've had my hands full.
So over and above the consequences of the truth, as you put it, you would not intend to harm him in any other way, would you?
Just tell the truth.
No. Answer the question. Would you or would you not intend to harm him in any other way than simply telling the Commission what you've told the Commission?
I'll put it to you again. I don't want any harm to come to Mr. Wakeford. All I want him to do is to live in the truth. Don't come to the Commission and blabber off absolute nonsense because you believe that that'll cover you. No, I told the truth, deal with the facts, the truth. Now you want to deal with racist issues and all that. Let's deal with the truth. The truth is, was there cement? Was there payments for Lindela? Was there special favors done? Was there deal stream? Was there Sims and Jack? Was there Vulisangu? Was there Royston Estate? Was those things all done? Yes, be honest about it. That's what I'm saying.
Mr. Agrizzi, you forced me to do this. You've rambled off, not answering my question, said a whole lot of things. And I have to, please don't interrupt me, and I'll make every effort not to interrupt you. Everything you've just said, as well as everything you say in your affidavits, I'm going to demonstrate to the chairman in the time that I have, is nothing but a twisting of the truth, the fabric of lies. So there's nothing you say that Mr. Wakeford accepts, and there's nothing that we're going to traverse today which is going to demonstrate you to be telling the truth. I'm just putting that to you right up front. Maybe it'll caution you from rambling on. I must give you an opportunity just to say a little something to that, if you wish.
Yes. Chair, I'll put it to you, Mr. Willis. As I sit before you, I have not lied, so please put everything that you want to at me. I'd appreciate it.
Mr. Agrizzi, who is Lord Peter Hayne?
Lord Peter Hayne was an apartheid activist. Anti-apartheid activist, sorry.
Anti-apartheid activist, you mean? You said yes. Apartheid activist, you mean anti-apartheid activist.
And he's known as a whistleblower in his own right, is he?
I don't know him that well, no.
And he's a man who campaigns against corruption, is that correct?
I don't know. I don't know the man at all.
And would you have any reason to make contact with him?
No.
I have before me here an email when on the 23rd of March this year at 8:20 p.m.
Yes.
The email address is angelo@angeloagrizzi.com. Is that your email address, yes or no?
That is my email address, yes.
To Lord Hayne, corruption, Zondo Commission and submissions, private and confidential. And there's an attachment available until 22 April 2021. Now, I opened that attachment. My attorney downloaded that attachment. When Lord Hayne sent this to our client, and our client sent it on to us.
Yes.
And that attachment was what, Mr. Agrizzi? Can you tell me?
I wouldn't be able to because I was asked the same question by my counsel and I said I did not send it.
It says, it's described that it was the preliminary report, dispute Wakeford versus Agrizzi, 29 February 2020, PDF. It's the preliminary investigative report by this commission, circulated only to the parties involved, namely yourself, your legal representatives, Mr. Wakeford and his, and Mr. Papadakis and Radhakrishna and their legal representatives. You never sent that to Lord Hayne.
Hang on, Mr. Wills. Did you say it's a report from this commission?
Yes, there's a complaint before you, Mr. Chairman, in this regard. It obviously has come to your attention. Well, it was drawn to your attention on 6th of May, but I know you have many a thing on your desk.
It certainly isn't a report that I've issued.
It's a preliminary investigative report. It's confidential between the parties.
It's by the investigation team.
By the investigation team. I don't know whether that is something which ever comes to your eyes.
No,
before your eyes.
I'm not aware of that, and obviously, it wouldn't be a report of the commission.
Yes.
It might be a document put together by the investigation team for a certain purpose as part of their investigation, but to the extent that it certainly shouldn't be referred to as a report of the commission.
I understand what you're putting to me, Mr. Chairman.
ECJ, I won't comment on the relevance of the cross-examination to date, but to say if this is an investigation report, your leave must be sought before it can be disclosed.
Yes.
In terms of the regulations, it cannot willy-nilly be placed before the public without your consent.
Yes.
An application should probably be made for that to do so.
I'll just continue and put it in context. Mr. Agrizzi,
but I think, Mr. Pretorius, what the point is making is anything that has not come before the hearing shouldn't be published in terms of the regulations without my permission. Now, I have no idea what that report says, and ordinarily, any documents that will be referred to during the hearing would be made part of the bundle first. Now, I don't know whether it is part of any of the bundles that we are using.
No, it's not.
Yeah.
Of course, anything that was part of the bundles and came before you becomes part of the public record of this commission. But let me explain further, and I ask Mr. Agrizzi to listen carefully.
Or maybe Chairman, no, don't do that.
I just want to explain it to you because...
No. I suggest that we adjourn. You come and explain to me in chambers so that I understand what it is before anything further is said in public about it.
I'll put this one side for now, and then if I could do that when we take the adjournment, so we save time. Thank you.
That's fine.
Chair, I think it's a very, very simple issue. It was very made clear, and the heading of this whole preliminary report was made clear to the parties concerned. That's Mr. Wakeford's counsel, his attorney, myself, the legal team. This report has been prepared for the purpose of facilitating decisions concerning the issues.
Yes, but why are you even saying that? I said we must adjourn and that I will be told in chambers.
Because it says no findings have been made.
No, you shouldn't even say that. I will discuss with counsel in chambers.
Then we'll discuss it in chambers.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay.
Mr. Agrizzi, I want to put to you as a reminder, and so that we can agree on your narrative. In its simple terms, it is as follows: that during a major Sars investigation, Mr. Wakeford, you say, approached Mr. Watson regarding Mr. Papadakis to get his assistance in relation to the Sars investigation, and an agreement was then reached in a meeting. You were not in this meeting, and that was between Mr. Wakeford, you say, Papadakis, and Watson, although you weren't part of that meeting. And the agreement, you say, was that Mr. Wakeford would get 100,000 Rand per month for managing the major SARS investigation with Mr. Papadakis, And in return, Mr. Papadakis would receive cement. And the relevance of Mr. Papadakis is that at the time of this meeting, Mr. Papadakis was employed by the South African Revenue Services. Is this a fair summary of your narrative?
Now, can you refer me to the document?
No, I'm not going to refer you to any documents, Mr. Agrizzi. I just want you to tell me, is that or isn't that your narrative?
Yes.
This is his narrative. This is the evidence that this man, Mr. Chairman, has repeated in affidavits more than once, more than twice. He's placed it before you. He's read it set out in our client's affidavit. And he knows what this narrative is. This narrative is set out in over 1,000 pages of documentation speaking to the issues. And that's why I'm not taking him to any one document. I want to understand from him whether this is a fair summation of his narrative. It is as follows, that during a major Sars investigation, Mr. Kevin Wakeford approached Mr. Gavin Watson regarding Mr. Papadakis, who worked for Sars, South African Revenue Service at the time. And an agreement was reached in a meeting. The meeting was between Mr. Papadakis, Mr. Watson, and Mr. Wakeford, not Mr. Agrizzi. He says he was not there. And the agreement, he says, was that Mr. Wakeford would get 100,000 Rand per month for managing the major Sars investigation with Mr. Papadakis, and Mr. Papadakis would receive cement. That's the issue in relation to cement. And I just want to know, is that a fair summation of his narrative?
Chair, I agree that the agreement was that George Papadakis would receive cement free of charge via Bosasa, and that Kevin Wakeford would be financially rewarded to that extent.
So are you saying that you agree to everything that I've set out? There's nothing I've set out there that's incorrect?
No, there's certain things, that's why I asked to be referred to it.
No,
I'm not sure if it was major Sars investigation or what my actual words were. I can't remember at this stage.
Look, I'm going to take you to all of this in due course. But this is your version, Mr. Agrizzi.
Take me there, that's what I'm asking.
No, I want you to answer are you refusing to answer the question?
I'm not refusing to answer any questions. I just want to be shown where it says
Let's start the first one. Is it correct that your version is that during a major Sars investigation, Mr. Wakeford approached Mr. Watson regarding Mr. Papadakis? Is that your version or not?
My version is that during the Sars investigation, yes, not a major one. I don't know where the word major comes from. That's why I'm asking you to show me.
Okay, you don't like the word major.
I don't know where it's coming from.
We'll get to it. You agree that your version is Mr. Wakeford approached Mr. Watson regarding Mr. Papadakis?
Correct.
And it is that there was a meeting held between Papadakis, Watson, and Wakeford that you were not part of. Is that also part of your version?
That's what Watson told me, yes.
Right, so that was hearsay. You don't have any first-hand information about that meeting?
I wasn't at the meeting, no.
Yes. And that Mr. Wakeford, so you understand, would be paid 100,000 Rand per month for managing the Sars investigation?
That is correct.
With Mr. Papadakis?
Mr. Papadakis would get cement.
Right. So apart from the word major, you happy with everything else?
Sure.
Now, obviously, we have to agree on a couple of things here. Firstly, this had to be before Mr. Papadakis left the South African Revenue Service. Is that correct? For this version of yours to hold water?
I presume so, but he still had his contacts in there, I presume. I don't know.
You don't know? So was Mr. Papadakis, to your knowledge, still employed at Sars at the time or not?
As far as I recall, yes.
And obviously it had to also be before the cement was ordered, because he had to first render the service and then he'd be paid. Would that be correct?
Probably, yes.
Now, Mr. Agrizzi, turn with me to page 906. Now, at paragraph 207, the heading is there, Affidavit of Agrizzi. And this is a quotation, an extract of your paragraph 43 from the affidavit that you placed before the learned chairman.
Yes.
Let's read it. It reads,
yes,
in relevant part 43.2. At one stage, Bosasa was encountering constant audits by the South African Revenue Services. Kevin Wakeford,
that is correct.
Kevin Wakeford would often be consulted by Gavin Watson on issues that Bosasa was facing.
Correct.
Kevin Wakeford would be paid a monthly fee for services rendered.
Correct.
We go down to paragraph 43.4. Kevin Wakeford approached Gavin Watson whilst we were undergoing a major, there's the word major. Kevin Wakeford approached Gavin Watson whilst, or during, we were undergoing a major Sars investigation. That's where those words came from. Now you know.
Sorry, just repeat it to me again. A major Sars investigation.
Yes.
Okay.
Right. So,
sorry, can you just carry on reading that? Bosasa entered into an agreement with Kevin Wakeford to pay him the amount of 100,000 Rand per month as a fee for providing services in relation to the SARS investigation.
Yes. Now,
okay.
Right. Now, you just look ahead, look to the rest, paragraph 43 finishes over the page. You will note there are no dates. There are no dates between 43.1 and over the page, the end of 43.5. Correct? There are no dates.
43.5. Right.
Yes.
No, I don't see any dates at all.
Do you recall that you testified to the chairman that Franz Forster would deal more thoroughly with the cement issue? Or do I need to take you to that as well?
Franz Forster would be the right person. He's the one who made arrangements after getting calls from Kevin.
Right. Then we go to 599. Angelo Agrizzi, cement to a certain property in Meyersdal, but I think that Franz Forster, or the next witness, will deal more thoroughly with that incident. That's where you said it.
Correct. That's correct.
You recall Mr. Forster's evidence? Page 909. Go down to the bottom of that page. Yes. Paragraph 209 says, the affidavit of Forster. During 2008, I was introduced to Kevin Wakeford. He was always visiting Gavin Watson, and he visited head office often. During late 2009, Gavin Watson called me in and said that Kevin will speak to me and instruct me to, I think the word would be help, him with the buying and delivering of wet and dry cement. Correct. So his version was that during late 2009, Watson called me in and said Kevin would speak to him. You see that? So that's his version, late 2009. Go to paragraph 30. Kevin Wakeford came to me in my office at procurement. He provided me with an address for delivery at the Mayor Park Eco Estate in Meyerton. Kevin would also phone me with the amounts of cement that he would need. During the year, we ordered wet cement from WG Wern and Randfontein. That's a reference to RTC. I think you know what that is. This was to be paid before delivery took place. Dry cement was ordered from Randfontein Trading Centre. That's the RTC, where we had an account. From a timing perspective, his version is, on dates, is that this occurred in late 2009, and it occurred for a year. So that's from late 2009 to late 2010. Does that make sense to you?
Yes.
Thank you. And if we go back to the other bundle now, to 4, so we go to page 614, Mr. Forster is now giving his evidence orally before the chairperson, and it's approximately 2 days later after he signed his written affidavit. Line 11, Advocate Buthelezi, SC, says, and then tell us about what happened in 2008. Mr. Forster says, during the middle of 2008, Gavin came to my office with a gentleman, and he introduced the gentleman to me as Kevin Wakeford. I did not really know Kevin. Across the page, 615, Advocate Buthelezi, SC, says, okay, then what, what happens during late 2009? Mr. Forster says 3 lines down. In 2009, Gavin Watson called me and said that Gavin will speak to me and instruct me to buy. Now, Chair, I refer to wet cement, that is cement that you order that comes in these big trucks and has been mixed. Did you buy cement for him over a certain period of time, or was it once or twice that he asked for, Mr. Forster? Chair, it was over a period of time. It was nearly a year, over a period of a year. That confirms what he told in the affidavit. You agree with me?
Yes.
So this event, everything had happened before late 2009, not so. Yes. The outside period was late 2009. And as you said, Mr. Probably, or your words, Mr. Papadakis would have to deliver on his service, and Mr. Wakeford, of course, and then they would be rewarded. Mr. Papadakis, free cement. Mr. Wakeford would receive his payment financially. Correct? I see you nodding.
Yes, I said he's right. He received payment via cement.
Okay.
Mr. Franz Forster's evidence, on all accounts, it had to be tied up with late 2009. Do you still agree with that?
Yes.
So we know that on Mr. Forster's version, he said and told the Commissioner that in the period late 2009 to late 2010 was when in that period, he ordered cement was supplied. And you have agreed with me that Mr. Papadakis could never have expected cement until he'd completed his service. So that must have been sometime before what Mr. Forster describes as late 2009. So you and I are on the same page, are we?
I can't comment on Mr. Forster's statement, but let's carry on.
Papadakis could not expect cement until he had delivered his service.
Well, can I explain how it worked? It worked a little bit differently.
Well,
that in certain instances, Chair, you would have to do the duty first, and in other instances, you were paid before the time or even during the time. It all depended on how Captain Watson felt.
As far as investigation is resolved, well, then you can have your cement. That would be the principle, wouldn't it? That's what you agreed to earlier.
What happens is there were many Sars investigations. They were running all of them. I mean, we were investigating every single year.
When was the first one?
Let me back right down to 2006.
How many are in and amongst the evidence in this matter?
I'm not sure how many, but it would have been one every single year. Every single year we audited ourselves.
I can tell you that you've never given evidence like that before.
That's a fact.
But you've never given evidence like that before.
No, I gave evidence on where Mr. Papadakis helped in terms of Sars investigations. That's what I did.
So let's stick to that evidence, okay? Is that fair? Let's not grow our evidence and adapt it. Not in this hearing, anyway.
I disagree with you, but carry on.
What do you disagree with?
We don't grow evidence and adapt it. We don't do that type of thing. We
Good,
give the facts, huh?
Then let's not do that. Good. Then you should agree with me that we shouldn't do it.
Well, Mr. Willis, he said there were many investigations. You asked him how many, and that's why he talked about the others. Okay,
Right.
Continue.
So, which major Sars investigation was it that came up that Mr. Wakeford, on your version, said, let's use Mr. Papadakis?
You know, if I recall correctly, there were a few. There was, I remember the Pezulu one. Then there was one with the supply chain management one. Then there was the bioorganics prawn farm, the CR prawn farm. There were a few.
Bioorganics and SEARC are the same thing. Same company. One's a company name, the other one's a project name.
No, they're not. No, they're not. I correct you. They are not the same thing.
So what is it? Bioorganics or SEARC? Are they two separate things, you say?
CR was down in Port Elizabeth at the Kucha, and bioorganics was up in Johannesburg at Krugersdorp.
Yes.
So they're two separate.
And where did the company start? It was taken over down in Port Elizabeth first, wasn't it?
It started in Port Elizabeth and then it was stopped. And then a new co was opened up for bioorganics, which was in Krugersdorp, opposite at the old Leopards Flame Mine Hostel.
Was there a SARS investigation into bioorganics?
Yes, there was.
Okay. Come back to my question. Turn to page 917. Please just take a minute to read what's there.
Sorry, I can't quote that, Chair. That's illegal.
Is this something that is related to what I must make a ruling on?
It is indeed, Mr. Chairman, but I'm just referring him to it for his own benefit.
Yes, but why should we use it until I've made a ruling in any way?
No, it's just for his benefit. He knows it. I'm not putting it anywhere else other than before him. So you see what's said there, Mr. Agrizzi. You've read that for yourself. Now, was that the major SARS investigation, yes or no?
Chairperson, I'm not going to answer that question because that question refers to a 417 inquiry, which I know is illegal for me to even read it. I'm not going to even entertain a question lest I get by judgment of.
I think you'll have to find maybe another way, Mr. Wills.
Allow me to make it clear to the witness and for your benefit, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Agrizzi, you're the only one who's told anybody what we're referring to, firstly. Secondly, I'm referring to that because that is evidence you gave under oath. I'd expect that it's the truth. And I just wanted to remind you, you said you weren't so sharp anymore.
No, Mr. Willis, no. If he has got to talk about this evidence, if this has got to...
Well, let me take another angle.
Yeah.
Mr. Agrizzi, turn to page 920. That's paragraph 244 on page 920. Allow me to read it. This is now Mr. Wakeford speaking under oath. He says, so the Commission's investigation team have confirmed that. Now, this is all what they say under Mr. Alan Nixon. Mr. Agrizzi and Mr. Forster stated that Mr. Papadakis was reimbursed for his services via the provision of cement to a property in Meyersdal, which was owned by Mr. Papadakis. Stop. This is dealt with in detail below and appears to have occurred in 2009. So that is what they said after they've looked at all the evidence and of course...
hang on, Mr. Willis. Where did they say this? Is it not in the document we talked about in Chambers?
Oh, it's in an investigation report, yes, but it's not in the 417.
Yes, no, but even the investigation report. Remember, we talked about that in Chambers.
Yes.
That what the investigators say.
Yeah, but that's not off limits to me. That's a document that Mr. Agrizzi knows, I know, our client, the respective lawyers know, and it's before us. So
no, I'm not sure that I should allow that. But if you wish to present argument, I can hear it and hear what Mr. Pretorius has to say. As I say, my inclination is that whatever they may have put as a report or say they have made findings, they have no legal power to make any findings. Their findings, whatever they call findings, has got no legal status.
Mr. Chairman, it's not worth the waste. It's not worth the time. I have another line.
Okay, all right.
Step to that line.
Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Your affidavit to the Commission, I'm going to take you to that. Go back to page 906, paragraph 43.2. At one stage, Bosasa was encountering constant audits. At one stage. What stage was that?
The period of time.
But from one stage. What is the stage? What must I understand the period of time to be?
This period of time would be the 10 years, in the 10 years that it was so under audit. That's a period of time.
Is that your answer, Mr. Agrizzi? A 10-year period?
Yes.
Very well, we'll come back to that. Was encountering constant audits by the South African Revenue Service. I want you to go down to 43.4. Gavin Wakeford approached Gavin Watson whilst we were undergoing a major SARS investigation. Which one was that?
Well, I don't know which one it was specifically.
Well, you make the allegation. You must know what you're talking about.
Which investigation were you referring to in that paragraph when you said, whilst we were undergoing a major SARS investigation?
Chair, there I would be referring to one of the bigger companies. So not the small companies like Security or like Lindela. That would have been a bigger company like Operations, Bosasa Supply Chain. It wouldn't be like Bosasa Properties. It was one of the major companies.
Do you recall when that investigation might have been in terms of years?
Chair, it was probably 2009, 2012, around there. You know, we got audited, Chair. You won't believe this. Every single year, every single company was audited. But the big audits were always on the bigger companies, like Operations. You know, those are the ones that really go into Operations, a lot of Corona, those type of things.
Okay, all right. Mr. Willis.
I'll read it to you again. Gavin Wakeford approached Gavin Watson whilst we were undergoing a major SARS investigation, not just any audit, a major SARS investigation. Your words under oath, Mr. Agrizzi. Which major SARS investigation was it during which Mr. Wakeford approached Mr. Watson?
I It was one of the big companies. That's all I can tell you.
You can't answer that question, can you?
And I've answered it. It's one of the big companies that we had.
Well, you tell me, you made the allegation. Please give me the specifics now.
Sorry, Chair, I don't understand.
Maybe let me ask this way and see whether you can answer. Which companies within the Bosasa group did you regard as major companies?
Source operations.
Sorry? Bosasa operations?
Source operations.
Yes.
There's also supply chain management. There's also Corano Fleet Management Services.
Sorry, what?
It's where we provided fleet management for about 15,000 government vehicles.
Yes. Hang on, I just want us to be clear about which ones you regarded as major. Bosasa operations,
Yes.
Corona Fleet Management,
Correct.
Bosasa Security as well or not?
Correct, yes.
Correct, yes.
Okay.
Is there another one or others?
Sondolo
Sondolo IT?
600 million rand, yeah.
Yeah,
And Pezulu Fencing,
and Pezulu Fencing.
yeah.
Okay, those were the
Also-
companies under Bosasa that you regarded as major companies.
That's what I would call a major order, it's a major company.
Yes.
The smaller like properties, the social properties, even the on ITs, those companies, they didn't really bother about. They were
Okay.
worried about the major companies, yeah.
Okay, so are you
Audited
saying,
them, but they weren't big audit.
okay, when you therefore said in this paragraph, namely 43.4, that Mr. Kevin Wakeford approached Mr. Gavin Watson whilst you were undergoing a major Sars investigation, are you saying that it was an investigation that related to one or more of those major companies you have mentioned?
I'm trying to refresh my memory, Chair. I think it might very well have been Pezulu at the stage, because there was a transaction, Pezulu and Simmerson Jack and Dealstream, it was a whole mess. It might have been that, but I can't say for sure. That was one of them.
Okay. Mr. Willis?
You, Mr. Chairman, Mr. Agrizzi, Mr. Chairman missed out Bosasa's supply chain.
Oh, yes, yeah, you mentioned
Supply
that.
chain management. And would bioorganics also be one of these?
It depends what year it was. Bioorganics bioorganics wasn't part of that. Bioorganics was a tax, a refund or something like that. Andries van Tonder would have covered it in his affidavit, not me.
So you're saying bioorganics was not a major one?
Not a major one.
Now, Mr. Agrizzi, it's been some 29 months since you first made these allegations, under oath and orally, and Mr. Wakeford has challenged you vociferously. He has, within the rules of this commission, he has challenged you at every corner, at every turn. He says that everything you say is false, a lie, a fabrication. He calls you a racist. He names circumstances. He came and gave evidence to the chairperson. You have known at all times that you had nothing but a serious foe in Mr. Wakeford. Would that be correct?
I don't think he's a foe. I think he's troubled. But I don't think he's a foe. I don't think, for someone who used to be very nice to me, I don't see why he's a foe.
I must tell you, and I must...
Sometimes, Mr. Willis, Advocate Willis, can I just say something? Sometimes people are put up to do things, all right, by certain other individuals. And sometimes people make the wrong decisions and they do certain things, all right? And that is perhaps what has happened to Mr. Wakeford. I don't have any vociferous dealings with him. I've never hated him. I actually think he's a nice guy. We used to share the same pastor even. He was a nice guy, Mr. Wakeford. I didn't see him as a bad person. Not at all. Not at all. What I don't like is that when somebody lies to cover up something else, that's not right. Rather tell the truth. You see, let me finish. You see, the big things goes about cement. Was cement delivered? And who ordered it? And who paid for it? That is it.
We're going to get to all of that, Mr. Agrizzi. And if Mr. Wakeford had anything to hide, he wouldn't be here. Now, I must say this to you in all fairness to you. All the evidence you give under oath. If you're lying, you're at risk of perjury.
Correct.
Perjury on a grand enough scale can put you in jail.
Most definitely.
And Mr. Wakeford intends that justice will be seen to before this commission and any other court, and by applying the rule of law when it comes to what he calls your fabrications and your lies. It's very important that you are aware that the preparation of this cross-examination is for no other purpose than to demonstrate to this commissioner that you are lying. That's what my job is, because that's what Mr. Wakeford has said to this commissioner under oath and in affidavits. Now, there might be things that were just simple errors, and you would be given the benefit of the doubt of that. That's why I'm asking you very specific questions to tell us what the answers are to these questions, to this paucity of detail, by way of which you defamed, because that's what he calls it, Mr. Wakeford. So all I want you to do is to take a deep breath, and just cast your mind back and tell me, in answer to the questions asked about your own words, what is the major Sars investigation you're talking about in paragraph 43.4? I mean, sit back, take some time. I've already referred you to something that I thought might be of assistance to you. You're not interested in that. But you tell us, please. It's important.
I've given you my answer. You either accept it or you don't. I can't force you.
So you're not going to answer my question?
No, I've given you my answer.
Go to the second sentence of paragraph 43.4 on page 906. Bosasa entered into an agreement with Kevin Wakeford to pay him the amount of 100,000 Rand per month as a fee for providing services in relation to the Sars investigation. There you were specific again. So I put it to you, Mr. Wakeford, you were speaking to a specific Sars investigation.
Sorry, I'm not Mr. Wakeford. Sorry.
Sorry, I do apologize, Mr. Agrizzi. You were speaking to a specific Sars investigation, and you don't want to tell me what that was.
Simply explained it to you, Chair, and I explained it very carefully. If I said it was a major investigation, it would have been one of the major companies. Simple as that, and I've explained that.
Let's go to your oral evidence, 597. According to the evidence on record, you started consulting with Mr. Alan Nixon, I think it was, back in September 2018. Would that be correct?
I don't think I consulted with Alan Nixon. I consulted predominantly with Mr. Frank Dutton and Colonel Herbie.
I could be wrong. That could be so. So the investigators of the Commission from around about September 2018.
Yes.
Okay. I know more or less how it would have worked after spending time with them. You would have also spent time with the Commission legal team responsible for this, which most of the time, and certainly back then, was Mr. Pretorius and Advocate September. Is that correct? You consulted with them. Correct. And that's how the preparation would have gone, not so?
Correct, yes.
Yes. Astute people, all of them, the commissioners, and I'm sorry, the investigators and the advocates?
There's definitely all of them.
Thank you. Advocate Paul Pretorius, SC, colon. Did Mr. Wakeford approach Mr. Watson on one occasion whilst SASO was undergoing a major SARS investigation? Mr. Angelo Agrizzi, colon. That is correct, Chair. What was that major SARS investigation, Mr. Agrizzi?
Chair, I want to read what I've got in front of me, please. What Mr. Willis has read me and what I've got in my documents are two different things. So I've got on page 599, all right, on line 17, Advocate Paul Pretorius SC, colon. You say you went to the meeting where Mr. Watson and Mr. Wakeford would have discussed matters regarding the investigation of SARS with Mr. Papadakis. Mr. Angelo Agrizzi responds, I was not in I cannot recall being in the meeting with Mr. Papadakis, Mr. Wakeford, and Mr. That is what I've got
hang on, Mr. Willis hasn't gone that far.
Oh, okay, sorry.
He hasn't gone that far. He was asking the question, which major SARS investigation that was, which Mr. Pretorius asked you about, and you said that is correct. His question was, which major SARS investigation was that?
I don't know. I don't know which investigation it was specifically.
Yes. Is it the one that earlier on you said it would have related to one of the major companies of under Bosasa?
That is correct, Chair. That is exactly what I said.
Okay.
Let's
Mr.
go to
Willis.
page 598, Mr. Agrizzi. Second line, Advocate Pretorius asks you, all right, was Mr. Wakeford paid a fee for his services in relation to this particular investigation and SARS investigations in general? Yes, he was paid a large sum of money every month. It was in the region of 100,000 rand per month. I take you back to the words in relation to this particular investigation. Which particular investigation was he referring to?
I can't remember right now. I don't know which one he was referring to. It was one of the investigations that we were having.
Mr. Agrizzi, you have made very serious allegations against someone, against a number of people, but in this case, Mr. Wakeford.
Yes.
It doesn't help to say, I can't remember. You must remember. Surely, I mean, you know that this man is not going to let up until he has proven his innocence.
And Mr. Willis, I'm not about to sit here and lie to anybody. I can't remember right now, and I can't remember. But the facts are the facts. And one simple question I have to ask you: has your client been instrumental in receiving cement on behalf of the Papadakis? End of story.
I think Mr. Willis, he has said he can't remember quite a few times which one of the major companies.
I'm putting it to you, Mr. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm putting it to you, Mr. Agrizzi. You're hedging. You do not want to commit yourself. You're too scared to commit yourself. You know the answer. I've already shown you a page on where you gave that answer, but you do not want to commit to that answer.
I disagree with what you're saying.
Here's the problem with your refusal to commit. Mr. Papadakis was called in for a specific period of time, specific investigation. And that's crucial to know what that investigation is. We know that it's in this period, late 2009 to 2010. Does that help your memory? Can't you remember what specific investigation it was to which you attach Mr. Wakeford and Mr. Papadakis when you implicated them before this commission?
Advocate Chairperson, I gave the answer. I said it was one of the major companies in South Africa, in Sars.
I'm under the impression, Mr. Willis, that earlier on, in answer to one of my questions, he said he thought it would have been between 2009 and 2012. Is my recollection correct, Mr. Agrizzi?
Yes, Chairperson, more or less. You know, it's a while back now. It's nearly 10 years ago.
You know, of course, that this issue of which investigation it was raised by Mr. Wakeford in his very first affidavit that he brought before the commission and served on you, to which you answered. You know that. You remember that?
Well, I'm trying to.
So you don't remember it?
I can't remember exactly. You know, you must also understand I've been through quite a tough time. I've been in the hospital for 52 days under ICU, and I came out and I'm still not 100%. But what I do know is that I didn't lie then and I never lied now. What I told the commission then and what I say now is exactly what is truthful.
Mr. Chairman, those dates that you recall Mr. Agrizzi saying, it was the date. So would that be late 2009 or just 2009, Mr. Agrizzi?
Wouldn't know. Probably 2009. I wouldn't know. I can't remember right now. We're talking now 12 years ago.
Mr. Papadakis, do you know when he was employed with Sars or not?
I've seen some documentation here from Sars in the documents you submitted.
Yes, they come from Mr. Nixon, the investigator. He informed all of us that his investigation revealed that Mr. Papadakis was employed in whatever station, whether it was as a consultant or as an employee, doesn't matter. On the 10th of March 2008, can you please listen to the question?
I must correct you. It wasn't from Mr. Nixon. Sorry, Chair. It's on page 684 of your bundle, and it states there from March 2008 to September 2013.
Yes, these are documents supplied by Mr. Nixon, Mr. Agrizzi. I'm glad to see your memories coming back to you and your knowledge of the bundle is being restored too. That bodes well and is encouraging. But the dates are the 10th of March 2008 to the 14th of September 2013. So those are the dates we know when Mr. Papadakis was with Sars.
Yes.
Of course, you know Mr. Papadakis' version that his only visit to Bosasa was in late 2014. You read that in his affidavit, didn't you?
I was not aware. I did not actually even, I didn't have time to go through his whole affidavit.
I think I need to take you to Mr. You just have to give me a moment. In Mr. Wakeford's affidavit, right at the outset, and this is in bundle 4, page 035, paragraph 96. Regarding the allegations relating to Sars by Agrizzi and the period referred to by Foster, late 2009 to late 2010, I have confirmed with BSASA that no engagement, brackets, investigation or audit, close brackets, from Sars with BSASA was initiated during that period. Apparently, the only engagement letter BSASA received from Sars during this period was on 18 August 2010, and the consequential information request sent by Sars is dated 23 March 2011, as per KW9. For KW9, you turn to page 064. That is you see it's a Sars letter. It's dated the 23rd of March 2011.
Yes.
According to the engagement letter sent to you on 18 August 2010. So that was what Mr. Let me read it finish. Sars will be conducting an audit on the tax affairs of Pezulu Fencing.
Yes.
One of the companies you mentioned. This is the evidence Mr. Wakeford put up right at the outset.
Yes.
Do you remember what you said to this? What you said about it?
I cannot recall.
Because let's have a look at it. You and I have agreed that the period when the evidence, when the cement on this is now on Mr. Foster's version, taken due to his evidence, both in affidavit and orally before the chairman, he said late 2009 to late 2010. Correct?
That's evidence, yes.
And we know that neither in your evidence in affidavit nor orally could you put any dates to anything. You referred or deferred to Mr. Foster, correct?
Yes.
And then Mr. Wakeford pointed out, but there's no Sars investigation in the period that he speaks to, because it was only on the 23rd of March 2011 that a letter was sent regarding the investigation. Now, the engagement letter...
Sorry, who makes that statement?
Who makes, Mr. Wakeford makes that, it explains this.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
So, let's get back to what I'm telling you.
Yes.
Mr. Wakeford tells the chairman, the reader, that according to the engagement letter sent on 18 August 2010, there was going to be an investigation. But the investigation letter comes on in March 2011. Now, do you remember what you said to this? What was your response to this?
Remind me, please.
Sorry?
Remind me, please.
You're too scared to commit, because you don't have any memory of it. You make it up as it goes along in your affidavit, Mr. Agrizzi.
Willis, I take exception to what you have said.
I will put it to you again then, sir.
Hang on 1 second. You want to put to him what you put him that he has an exception to?
Mr. Agrizzi, I'm going to put it to you.
Yes.
You don't remember what you say, simply because you've made it up as you go along, and whatever you said is not the truth. And that's why you don't remember it. You make it up as you go along.
You want to respond, Mr. Agrizzi?
Chairperson, I'm going to respond and say to you that whatever evidence I've given, my affidavits have given, has been truthful. It's been proven. It's been proven that Mr. Papadakis received cement from RTC and Wern, and that Mr. Kevin Wakeford was the liaison person to Mr. Watson. That is the facts. That's all I can say, the truth. The evidence is that there was deliveries of cement to Mr. Papadakis' premises. His ex-wife, Mrs. Krishna Ellingelbracht, confirms it. And everybody, and Franz Forster, unfortunately, is lying in ICU, but he would also confirm it. Maybe 1 or 2 dates were incorrect, but the fact is the matter. The fact of the matter is, Mr. Wakeford arranged for the cement to be delivered. Now, because I don't say what Mr. Willis wants me to say, I'm sorry. He gets upset, I'm sorry. But I'm answering it to the best of my ability.
By the way, Mr. Agrizzi, I know you say you only received this bundle yesterday afternoon, and your counsel informed me that you did receive them in this form. We've known for a number, 2 weeks odd, that we were going to be cross-examining you here today. And our client and ourselves have been preparing. Have you been preparing for today?
No.
Why ever not?
I've been preoccupied with other issues to do with my health and my family. I don't need to prepare for something that I told the truth about.
You don't need
I can answer you without having to prepare anything. I just tell the truth.
So you don't need to prepare when you tell the truth. Is that because somebody who tells the truth remembers what the truth is?
Yeah, correct.
And somebody who doesn't remember the truth and has to be taken to what he said every time, is that not somebody who didn't tell the truth and was making it up as he went along?
Except the detail.
Well, doesn't the devil lie in the detail, as the saying goes, Mr.
You would know, Mr. Willis, wouldn't you?
Well, it seems I'm demonstrating it to you, with respect. You raise your eyebrows. Do you want to answer that?
No, it's just a nice topic to write about. Thank you.
Turn to page 176, Mr. Agrizzi, in bundle 4. You'll see there, paragraph 55, it says, add paragraph 96. By this stage, if you didn't know before, that means that you are dealing with paragraph 96 of Mr. Wakeford's founding affidavit, the one that I just read, we read through and referenced the Sars letter. Let's read what you said. You said this: the engagement letter from Sars was on the 18th of August 2010. Well, we know that from the letter. And the information requested was on the 23rd of March 2011. We know that from the letter. I did not deal with the accounting side of the business, but I am aware of the information and documents that were requested in relation to Pezulu Fencing Proprietary Limited. I'm aware that it was in respect of SARS matters that Gavin Watson requested the assistance of Kevin Wakeford. I was also aware of his association and friendship with George Papadakis. That's your answer. Nothing about, well, there were major companies and we were being audited absolutely all the time.
Then why did you ask me the question if you needed to know?
Well, I'm asking you why you didn't deal in that paragraph with what you've told us at least today.
Because I'm sticking exactly with what I said. I'm not changing anything.
But you also did not point to any major SARS investigation back then.
Explain to you again that when I consider a major investigation, over the 10-year period, we had lots of major investigations.
Mr. Agrizzi, you and I have agreed that it had to fall within a certain period. And it was Mr. Franz Forster's period, late 2009 to late 2010. And in that period, according to your evidence, there was a major SARS investigation. I've taken you to all the wording, both in your affidavit as well as in your oral evidence, which clearly indicates you were speaking to one specific investigation. And in fact, the understanding from Mr. Pretorius, from having consulted with you, having read all your documents, was a particular matter.
Are you speaking on behalf of Advocate Pretorius?
Are you going to answer my question or not?
I disagree with what you have to say. I'm sorry.
I'm
very sorry. I'm not trying to be argumentative. I'm just telling you I disagree with what you have to say. You're trying to cover up corruption in this country by alluding to the fact that dates are wrong. It's wrong.
So would it be then correct that you cannot tell this commission about any major SARS investigation in the period late 2009 to late 2010? You can't.
Excuse me.
Well, I thought, Mr. Willis, I thought that he said, and that was my recollection earlier on, that the major investigation he was talking about happened between 2009 and 2012. And you asked him whether late 2009 or just 2009, and he said 2009.
Well, I've put it to him, Mr. Chairman, with respect.
Yes.
That he cannot tell us of any major SARS investigation between 2009, late 2009 and late 2010.
Well, my understanding is that the reference to late 2009 and late 2010 came from Mr. Foster's evidence or affidavit, who said that the delivery of cement happened over a year or so from late 2009. I didn't understand Mr. Agrizzi to say the major investigation was from late 2009 to late 2010. I didn't understand him to say that.
With respect, Mr. Chairman, that's what he agreed to right at the outset with me.
Okay,
When
I'm just saying I don't
he
have
committed
that
himself
recollection.
right at the outset.
Yes.
He started out with his narrative
Yes.
as to what his version was against Mr. Wakeford. And he agreed. And he agreed on two things. Firstly, that he relied on the evidence of Mr. Franz Forster.
Yeah.
He agreed that in all probability the services of Mr. Mr. Papadakis would have to be completed before the end of the period in order to have received his cement. And we know that the cement delivery took place in late 2009 to late 2010. So on that premise, Mr. Chairman, it must have taken place even before late 2009. Logically.
Well, we can always check the transcript in terms of what he may have agreed. I may have misunderstood, but that's how I understood. I don't know if Mr. Pretorius has any understanding. He is not indicating a one way or another. But the transcript, Mr. Agrizzi?
Sorry, Chairperson, I can just make mention. What you said was 100% right, okay? Any other assimilation or understanding is incorrect. And I just want to point out, Mr. Willis, if I agreed what he had to say, I did not agree to what he had to say. He needs to go back into transcripts and check. You see, Chairperson, that is why I'm very detailed in my explanation. And I know sometimes it takes a bit longer, but that's why I said right at the onset, rather let me explain myself properly. Thank you,
no, that's fine. The transcript can be checked. Mr. Willis.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I must put it to you, Mr. Agrizzi, after you saying that if there's one thing that characterizes your evidence on affidavit for this commission when you were led and in your cross-examination is a complete paucity of detail. That is what characterizes your evidence. In other words, the contrary to what you've just stated.
It's your opinion.
And we will be arguing that, of course. Now, Mr. Agrizzi, let's turn in your affidavit to page 154. So this is a series of paragraphs. It says, in their statements made to the Commission, and to a far lesser degree in their oral evidence presented to the Commission, these witnesses have purported to implicate me in the business of the Commission in its investigation into the affairs of BSASA, now known as African Global Operations, Gavin Watson and others. That's Mr. Wakeford who says that. Now we turn to where Mr. Agrizzi deals. That's just a simple general introductory paragraph, but be that as it may. Mr. Agrizzi spends a number of paragraphs just fleshing out all sorts of things. And at 4.11, I'm going to go to Mr. Chairman. Mr. Agrizzi, you say, I'm attaching further here 2 copies of invoices for the services provided by Kevin Wakeford to BSASA in respect of his fees that he charged, full stop. And it says this. Initially, Kevin Wakeford sent an inquiry for a price of 25 bags of cement as a guise. Then the next paragraph, I've attached as annexure KW 37.1 the initial request of 25 bags of cement. Now, let's turn to 37.1. And here, this is now an email dated the 20th of July, 2011. Now we're a year further ahead. And you say, could you give me as Mr. Wakeford's asking you, could you give me a quote on 30 cubic meters of 20 NPA cement, including VAT? Now, he was asked about that before the Commission on the 6th of May, and he said that was just an inquiry he had made for cement at the time. He testified it had nothing to do with Mr. Papadakis. But your handwriting is there, is that correct? Circa when cement started. Is that your handwriting?
Yes.
So now, the cement started in July 2011.
Sorry, Mr. Willis, you're totally incorrect here.
Well, if I'm incorrect, please point that out.
Okay, what is incorrect, Mr. Agrizzi?
When he says certain when cement started, it's just a note I made. I don't know what that actually refers to. Does it refer to dry cement, wet cement, cubic cement, NPA cement? What does it refer to?
You tell us.
I don't know what I wrote. That was written quite some time ago.
Yes, it was. Mr. Wakeford has had to dig back hard into his records, his memory banks, many hours spent with his legal representatives. I presume you would have done the same, both with your legal representatives and the Commission legal team. In other words, approximately, that's what circa means.
Yeah.
when cement started.
Yeah.
Right, so now I put it to you that you were trying to convey here that now the date is 20 July 2011. You were now preparing to adapt your version from late 2009, which was Mr. Franz Forster's version, late 2009 to 2010, and we're now moving to mid-2011. We're now moving on because you didn't like the facts that Mr. Wakeford had put up in his affidavit.
That's your opinion.
Is that your answer?
Sorry, Mr. Agrizzi, is
Yes,
that
sir.
your handwriting?
That is my handwriting, Chair.
When did you write circa when cement started? When did you write it?
Chair, I don't know when I wrote. Probably wrote it closer to the time when the affidavit was being prepped.
Okay,
Probably.
okay, all right.
But of course, you couldn't depose to that under oath because there were no dates initially in your affidavit. So we don't find in your affidavit that you speak to any major Sars investigation, either in late 2009 to late 2010. You don't put a version down. You rely on circa when cement started. You even now don't recall why you say that, almost as if you were leaving it there to hedge, but we know that the date it's associated with is almost a year further in the version. Any comment?
That's your opinion.
Is that your answer?
That's my answer.
What was interesting, however, was that the man who did know the dates, that his version was also adapted. Turn with me to B276. Now, this is the affidavit you can see across the page of Mr. Foster. He is answering like you did, and I just took you to know he's answering Mr. Wakeford's founding affidavit. He says, fourth paragraph down, to the best of my recollection, these orders for cement took place between 2009 and 2011.
Sorry, Mr. Willis. You are being opportunistic at best. The best is you ask Mr. Franz Foster, hopefully he recovers soon and will be out of ICU to answer on his affidavit.
No, that is an opportunistic answer, Mr. Agrizzi, because you rely on Mr. Franz Foster for the detail relating to the orders for cement. You said that under oath. I took you to that earlier. What is your answer now?
My answer remains, as I said, speak to Mr. Foster about his account of events.
Okay. So I put it to you that this adaptation mirrors the adaptation in your affidavit. As you said, we shouldn't be adapting our evidence. So I put it to you that both you and Mr. Foster adapted your evidence after you received the founding affidavit of Mr. Wakeford.
My response remains that, as I put it, it is. If you don't like it, I'm sorry.
So as soon as Mr. Wakeford reveals that there's no investigation until 2011, you and Mr. Foster quickly adapt your version. But it's interesting because you didn't adapt the version to 2012. Well, not yet anyway. I don't know if you're still going to do that. But you told Mr. Chairman that up to a period of 2012. Well, you hadn't broadened it to that yet. Well, in fact, you have changed the version today. This is now the third version. You have now broadened it to 2012. You've adapted. I put it to you that in today's proceedings, you adapted your evidence again.
My answer to that is quite simply that I've given you my answer. I haven't changed my version. My version remains. Kevin Wakeford arranged cement with George Papadakis at Sars. That is my version.
Mr. Agrizzi, you see,
Yes.
what I'm putting to you are facts, objective facts. That,
Yes.
in fact, most of them come out of either your mouth or Mr. Foster's mouth, or out
Yes.
from under your pen under oath. So you can
Yes.
stick to your version as much as you like. You need to grapple with the facts and the detail. If you don't, we will argue accordingly, of course.
If I
No.
may ask a question, did
Yes.
Mr. Papadakis speak to me? It's or no?
I'm not here to answer your questions, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Witz, opportunistically in my view, seems to be suggesting to me from the side that I have 3 minutes left, or 5 minutes left, and he wants to then have 3 minutes. I'm nowhere near finishing. I might be closing in on the halfway mark. But Mr. Agrizzi is the type of witness that is stringing this out. He's uncooperative, He's not playing ball, as they say. And that has made my job impossible. And so whatever's going to be said or wants to be said by Mr. Witz on behalf of Mr. Agrizzi or anyone else to the effect that I must be stopped in my cross-examination is going to be tantamount to a violation of Mr. Wakeford's rights, especially under these circumstances. So I'm fitting that in quickly because I don't, if my learned friend wants to get up here,
he should
I will
not
sit
have,
down.
He should not have spoken to you while you are on your feet there.
Thank you. I just felt I was obliged to tell you what it was that I spoke to the side.
No, that's fine. But what I do want to mention to you, in fairness to you, is that I may have to need very strong persuasion that I should give you more than the 4 hours you originally indicated.
Yes.
I'm not going to stop you now.
Very well.
But
I'm going to now adopt a different, hopefully a time-saving exercise.
Yes.
Because I'm going to be referencing. Mr. Agrizzi doesn't want to grapple with the facts. We've seen that. I will argue that to you in written papers. I don't think I'm going to have the opportunity to.
Yeah, I will. You certainly will get a chance to.
I just, when you come to those heads of argument in due course, you will then understand why I'm now just going to put to him objective evidence. He chose not to prepare for today. That's his problem, Mr. Chairman. Yeah. And if he doesn't want to play ball and allow us to work sequentially through the papers, look at the facts, either make concessions where he can make concessions or not, then I have to now adopt an appropriate approach given what you've said to me. I'm going to proceed to do that.
Okay.
Mr. Agrizzi, the Commission's investigators obviously pursued information and evidence which they grappled with, considered. You yourself referred to correspondence, and particularly that Sars letter. We received that, like you would have, through the investigators. And in fact, you've worked hand in glove with the investigators for months at certain points in time. And I want to put certain things to you. It appears it matters not if I go through the detail because you just keep harping on about what your version is. You don't want to engage on the issues. So I'm going to do it in this fashion. In regard to RTC, was that, if you could assist me there, was that Randfontein Trading Centre? Is that the name?
I know it's RTC. I know RTC. That's
of course, they were around for many years. There the Commission found...
I'm sorry.
The investigators, not the Commission.
No, but the investigators too. They don't make any findings.
Very well. What we've established, and I will place this before the learned chairman in the heads of argument in due course, is that between 1 January 2009 to 30 December 2011, and remember the period it starts late 2009, and we've gone all the way up to past your adapted date of July 2011, that RTC was only paid 91,121 rand and 89 cents by Bosasa. That's all they were paid. You'll recall.
What was that?
Sorry?
What was that?
What do you mean, what was it? Those were orders and invoices. If monies were paid by Bosasa to RTC in that period, 1 January 2009 to 30 December 2011, and it was only 91,121, then it would have been for product delivered, whatever it was. Can you dispute that? Can you take me to anything by way of which you can dispute that evidence that will be placed before the Commissioner in the heads of argument?
I cannot dispute that was delivered.
What? You can't dispute it was delivered? I didn't ask if it was delivered. I asked you whether you can dispute that that's the amount of money that was paid by Bosasa to RTC.
Presumably, yes.
So you're agreeing with it now?
Yes. If that's been paid by Bosasa, it's been paid.
You'll recall in the founding affidavit, Mr. Wakeford put up a record he'd received from Bosasa. My attorney had written to Bosasa, they had sent a record of details, and in his affidavit he said only 63,000 rand of materials from those records procured by the Bosasa group were from RTC. So it just shows that it was very close. 63,000 and then the 91,000 that came up in later documents.
Sorry, Chairperson, can I ask a question? Because I need clarity. We're talking about deliveries of cement, but I mean, Bosasa had lots of deliveries of cement as well. Are these specific to Mr. Papadakis and the property in Meyersdal, or is this in Bosasa in totality? That's the question I need to ask.
That's a fair, engaging question. Thank you for that. It was in respect of Bosasa group of companies as a whole.
Can I ask the question? I'll be more specific to you and say, can you explain to me, was it in terms of deliveries for Bosasa at Meyersdal?
No, it's not in respect of deliveries at Meyersdal, except for one specific invoice dated the 26th of February 2010 for the amount of 2,798 for a delivery which was never fulfilled because it was credited. If you'd had regard to the records, you would have seen that yourself.
Continue, please.
Thank you. So can you dispute that? Have you considered the records, looked at everything that are in these bundles, in these papers, which have been exchanged between yourself and Mr. Wakeford? Can you dispute that?
I cannot dispute the fact that cement was delivered on Bosasa's account to Mr. Papadakis. That is my answer.
Of course you can't dispute that because you allege that, Mr. Agrizzi. Please think before you answer the question. Let me give you another opportunity. Can you dispute what I've put to you?
Advocate Willis.
As if you can, please do.
Advocate Willis, I stand by what I said, that cement was delivered, paid for by Bosasa, to Meyersdal in gratification for Mr. Papadakis. That is a fact.
Mr. Chairman, I just want to place on record that is an example of Mr. Agrizzi just harping on his own version, not engaging with the facts. There's nothing I can do. I'm going to move on, Mr. Chairman.
Okay.
Did you read the affidavit of Mrs. Luanda Davids by any chance?
Yes, I did.
Good. So she was asked to supply certain information on behalf of W.G. Wern. And from her evidence...
Chairperson, he's referring to a document that was supplied by Mr. Nixon. Is it fine if I comment on it?
I'm sorry, whose affidavit? Hang on, Mr. Agrizzi.
I am not, Mr. Chairman. I'm referring to a document supplied by Advocate Notche, which is before you.
But what was the name of the deponent? Is it an affidavit?
Yes, it's an affidavit by a witness.
By a witness?
From the company W.G. Wern.
Yes.
As opposed to an affidavit.
And is it in the bundle?
It's in the bundle, yes.
Okay. If it's in the bundle, Mr. Respond to it, Mr. Agrizzi.
Can you refer me to the page number?
The affidavit has the tab number 11 on it. You'll find it at page 810 in bundle 4. This was a document that you tended to me that you had read. Correct, Mr. Agrizzi?
It's correct.
Even though you sought to have the chairman excluded because you say it comes from Mr. Nixon. But you know the document, don't you?
Chairperson, I asked if this was part of the investigation report from the commission, which evidently it is because it was taken by Mr. Nixon. So I don't know, and that's why I asked the question, Chairperson, if I'm allowed to read this document or go through this document or discuss it on the commission if it was a document that emanated from the original investigation file of the commission.
Yes, I see that it is not signed on mine. It's not supposed to.
Mr. Chairman, if you go to page 813,
yeah,
then you will see there it's in manuscript.
Yeah.
And on page 816, you will see where it's commissioned, probably by the same person who scribed it for the witness, a police officer. So if we turn now to page 820, now, because you've studied the document, or have had regard to it before, you'll recall that what Ms. Davids puts up are 12 annexures. However, if you read her affidavit, if you studied them, only 9 of them are relevant to delivery of cement to Mr. Papadakis' property.
Mr. Willis, I'm trying to get clarity, Advocate Willis. Didn't you just tell me there was only one invoice delivered? You mentioned earlier that there was only one invoice delivered, and now you're saying there were 12. I'm confused.
Well, I'm surprised that you're confused, because that was in relation to RTC. Mr. Agrizzi, this is Wern, WG Wern. You said you read this affidavit.
Thank you, that's why I asked for a clarification.
So, as I said, you'll recall that there are 12 annexures. Only 9 of them apply to the delivery of cement to Mr. Papadakis' property. And at page 820 is the first order. You see that document, 820? And look at the date there.
Yes.
The first order was placed on the 22nd of February 2009.
Yes.
The beginning of 2009 is the placement of the first order. Now, on the premise that you and I agreed to first deliver your services and then take payment, if you are to be believed, Mr. Papadakis would have had to render his services prior to or around about February 2009. Would that make sense?
Chairperson, if I may just comment, when Mr. Advocate Willis referred to being paid for deliveries, I made it very specifically clear that Mr. Gavin Watson worked differently with each individual person. He didn't necessarily pay people when they did the job, before they did the job, or after they did the job. I made that very clear. So I find it very disconcerting that Mr. Willis would say that I had agreed to something which I had not agreed to, and the transcripts would speak for themselves.
Very well. The record will speak for itself, and we'll argue that in our heads of argument. Go to page 846. Yeah. So, 846, Mr. Agrizzi, if you've studied Luanda Davids' affidavit, demonstrates that the last delivery by W.G. Wern to Mr. Papadakis' property was on the 9th of July 2009. Do you see that?
I see that, yes.
Is that it?
So,
okay.
On the version, and Mr. Papadakis has explained in his affidavit that evidence was read out and dealt with on the 6th of May. He's explained what the delivery of cement was all about, but we see here that the last delivery by W.G. Wern is on the 9th of July 2009. And by the way, it was for approximately the total on those invoices, 200,000 Rand, not 600,000 as you and Mr. Forster would lead the chairman to believe. Be that as it may, this is the last invoice. This is the last time any cement was delivered by Bosasa to Mr. Papadakis. The records, the objective evidence demonstrates that. Can you dispute that?
Cannot dispute that Mr. Papadakis got cement from Bosasa.
That's not the question.
Well, the question, Mr. Agrizzi, is about when it was the last delivery was made. Did you say, Mr. Willis, that was...
the question is whether he can dispute it. Whether he, on objective evidence, can dispute that this is the last delivery made by W.G. Wern of cement to Mr. Papadakis' property.
Yes, and the date, is the date the 9th of July 2009?
Yes.
Okay, so what do you say to that, Mr. Agrizzi?
I cannot confirm that it was the last delivery because quite simply I haven't had access to the records of the Sars or W.J. Wern. I do know that the investigators have been investigating it, but I can't say that was the last delivery. I don't know. Franz Forster needs to testify on how many deliveries. I gave the broad picture of how much cement was delivered in broad terms. Mr. Forster would be the right person to answer exactly how much, because he wrote out the orders that Kevin Wakeford ordered from him.
But when did you give that to him?
And I didn't give him the broad scope. I said to you, if you listen, Mr. Willis...
Well, I'm asking you to repeat it.
I'll repeat it. Mr. Willis, if you listen carefully, what I said was, I gave in my testimony the broad overview. If you want the detail of what Kevin Wakeford ordered via Franz Forster will give testimony when he's better and he's out of ICU. Simple as that. He did the actual orders. Kevin Wakeford would phone him and he would place the order. And the order would be delivered to Mr. Papadakis' property.
Just to remind you of what the version of Mr. Wakeford and Mr. Papadakis was, that Mr. Forster dealt with Mr. Papadakis' building contract.
Mr. Papadakis has not come and argued that he did not or did receive cement, didn't he?
Well, did you read his affidavit? He makes out a compelling argument as to the paucity of detail as to this. There's just nothing to answer. Didn't you read his affidavit? That's why he has not been advised to come here. There's just no detail. Did you read his affidavit?
Well,
You actually did,
Mr.
because you answered it. You put together an answering affidavit just a few weeks ago. So I'll just repeat that. The question is, did you take note of his arguments in which he explains why there's nothing for him to come and tell this commission? But he tells the commission what did happen. Did you read it?
Mr. Willis, I did read it in depth. I disagree with it completely.
So you can't dispute that the last delivery was the 9th of July 2009.
I cannot dispute that the last delivery to the advisor Papadakis was in 2009.
Thank you. And we know that there's no evidence before the commission of a SARS investigation prior to the 9th of July 2009.
No, you're incorrect.
Sorry?
You're incorrect. You're only saying that because it's based on the testimony of your client, Mr. Wakeford.
No. I'm showing that on the basis of your complete and utter failure to place evidence before the commission to substantiate your allegations.
That is your perception.
Very well. My perception, as long as the evidence exists for my client's benefit, we will argue that to the learned chairman. So, Mr. Chairman, that would be an opportune time for a short break.
Continue.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Agrizzi, I now want to turn to deal with the consultancy agreement between Mr. Wakeford and Bosasa. You concede, because that's what your evidence seems to demonstrate, that Mr. Wakeford, through his closed corporation, Wakeford Investment Enterprises, was contracted to Bosasa as a consultant. Is that correct?
Yes, as far as I know, yes.
And that was from 2006 until April 2015. Can you dispute that?
I can't dispute. There was never an agreement, so I can't tell you. There's no agreement in place. It was just getting paid and paid and paid.
That was another meeting that you were not party to. That was an agreement between him and Mr. Gavin Watson. So can you dispute that there was an agreement between them?
There's no written agreement between them.
You made...
I cannot comment on agreements that I have not seen. I was just told to pay the invoices as they came in from Mr. Wakeford.
Well, I put it to you, the evidence is quite clear that he was a consultant to Bosasa for the period 2006 to April 2015. Can you dispute it?
I can't dispute what you're telling me.
Thank you. And he was paid a fee throughout of 50,000 Rand per month, plus the 14% VAT, 57,000 Rand in total, when the odd month where there were a couple of extra expenses. Can you dispute that?
I can't dispute what he was paid.
In fact, the Great Plains...
You're talking about invoice payments, eh? Not talking about cash or anything like that. Just invoices.
Yeah, there never was cash, Mr. Agrizzi.
Okay.
Or you're going to adapt your version and add that today, because unless you can show that to me in an affidavit or in a document here, I'm going to stop you before you jump to something like that. You want to grow your version today? That now there was cash involved?
So Willis, I'm not your client. I don't grow my version.
Well, Mr. Agrizzi, you're right, you're not my client. It is in the public domain. The demand has been made of you by the liquidators for 91 million Rand of funds that you have funneled out of Bosasa entities. That is in the public domain. Now, what do you have to say about that when you want to talk about my client?
There's also a demand in the domain that SARS wants 500 million from me. It's also in the public domain.
Yes. Interesting.
Carry on, Mr. Willis.
What am I to understand from that, Mr. Agrizzi? Is that a threat, or must I carry on with the questioning?
Yes, yeah.
Thank you.
I'm sorry, I think Mr. Pretorius wants to say something.
Just to say, Chair, that if the witness has an answer in cross-examination that is not included in a prior statement or affidavit, there's nothing to prevent him giving that answer, and he should be allowed to do so.
Yeah, well, I don't know whether you're talking about any specific answer or question, Mr. Pretorius.
I think what Mr. Pretorius is talking about is the fact that I asked him about the 91 million and the answer he gave, which is a collateral issue, and Mr. Pretorius is correct, save that I didn't take the issue any further. It was just that I made certain that I understood what Mr. Agrizzi followed up with. Okay. You also can't dispute that Bosasa fell into
Hang on, Mr. Agrizzi.
Sorry, I didn't understand what was meant by that by Mr. Pretorius and Mr. Willis.
I think maybe you can leave it to the lawyers. You've got your counsel here. He understands what Mr. Pretorius was saying. Okay.
You also can't dispute that Bosasa fell into arrears paying Mr. Wakeford for a period of time.
No, I can't dispute that at all.
Yes, thank you. And you can't dispute that there were catch-up emails, or catch-up payments, which are reflected in emails.
That would have been done by the accounts department.
Yes, and you were involved. In fact, you stopped those payments, and you were the one who controlled his expectation of when he would get double payments back.
No.
That's what the records say. Do you dispute that?
I dispute that. Mr. Watson was the one who said, don't pay him for these months or whatever, don't pay him, we can wait. That was Mr. Watson's instructions.
Very well. Let me just, page 991 in bundle 4B, Mr. Chairman. So at the bottom of page 991 is an email from you, the 7th of March 2012. Can I ask you just to stop there? I just want to put something to you. Mr. Wakeford's payments after the arrears, after Bosasa had fallen into arrears, can you dispute that they recommenced, I think, on the 24th of August 2010? Can you dispute that? In other words, the doubled up payments.
There was such a mess with his accounts always. He thought he wasn't paid, then he was paid, and there was such a mess that eventually, I think it was Ted, his attorney, his accountant, made such a mess of all the payments, we didn't know what was happening. So to ask me now, can I dispute? It's very difficult because it was very confusing. I remember this email because I asked Carlos Bonifacio, who was the accountant at the time, to sort it out and to make sure when are we being paid and when hasn't he been paid, because his accounting system was such a mess. Well, so I remember the email from that.
I want to put it to you, there's no evidence, objective evidence to verify what you've just said, anywhere in these papers.
I can find it for you, that's not a problem.
Well, where's the objective evidence that his accounts were in a mess?
I'll show you. There's an email from him to his accountant to say this shouldn't have been invoiced at Bosasa, it should have been invoiced at Vuli Sangu. Unfortunately, it takes me a bit of time, but I'll get to it, don't worry.
I know what you're referring to, Mr. And I'll take you there, Mr. Agrizzi. It's one email where his accountant had forwarded his accounts in relation to other clients to Bosasa, and he was embarrassed by it, and he corrected it. That's the one, isn't it?
There were so many of them.
Really?
There was he's just reflected that, but there were so many of them.
I want to put it to you that you've put up only one such email, the one I referred to.
Just an example.
So let's read
Sorry, Chairperson, if I can address this.
Yes.
I want you to remember that when I left Bosasa with the other whistleblowers at that time, what happened, Chairperson? We weren't allowed any information. We were cut off from all information. Laptops were stopped. They were erased, and we had no information. So the information we provided was basically information that we had available with ourselves. So that's why there might have only been one email from myself to say, listen, there's a problem with your account here, please sort it out. Mr. Wakeford will also remember that Dr. Jurgen Smith had a major go at him because he wasn't registered for tax, and he was claiming tax, and he wasn't registered. Dr. Smith himself dealt with the issue.
Where is that in the evidence? Have you put that up as evidence?
No, because that is on my computer, which I don't have anymore, which is at Bosasa. But we can gladly ask the liquidators to go into all the Bosasa emails and pull them. Unfortunately, we've asked for it, but we haven't get it.
You worked hand in hand with the investigators of the Commission for nearly 3 years. And I put it to you, you have made practically no effort to secure any information, notwithstanding the challenges by Mr. Wakeford.
No, you are totally incorrect.
Very well, the record will speak for itself. Let's read this email. It says, you've addressed it to Carlos Bonifacio. Very well. This was done as agreed when I reduced K. Wakeford. So please, if you can make a payment of 50,000 Rand for March and 50,000 Rand for Feb, we are well behind it, but I will manage expectations on his side. Consultant is using the attached vehicle to channel payment. That was a reference below to Mr. Radhakrishna, but the first part is a reference to Mr. Wakeford. So you said I reduced K. Wakeford.
Yes.
And then we read in the various emails about the catch-up, and that's where he was paid 100,000 Rand plus VAT.
Yes.
And can you dispute from the records, and you've had his evidence affidavit now for approximately 6 weeks, can you dispute that what he demonstrates, including evidence of the Great Plains system of Bosasa, can you dispute that every amount received by him matches 1-for-1 for the invoicing to Bosasa for his consultancy fee? Can you dispute that?
Mr. Willis, Advocate Willis, I'd like to refer you to page 990, where it says, at paragraph 91, CKW 003 004 005 emails that depict the dire situation of Kevin Wakeford's financial system. So I cannot dispute the figures that Mr. Wakeford puts forward, but what I can dispute is it shows that there was a dire situation of his financial system that caused the delay in the payments. Because we never knew what to pay.
Let's go to 003, 4, and 5. Can you turn to page 190? Let's read from the bottom of 190.
Yeah.
Right, let's read at the bottom. So the original message is Carlos Bonifaccio. He's writing to Lindy Erasmus, and he says to her, it's regarding July payment. Hi, Lindy. Do we have any more outstanding invoices for Wakeford Enterprises? I thought that we had brought the account up to date. I don't recall any new invoices. Please checking it back to me soonest. There's an email above. He sends again, hi, Colleen. Do you have any recent invoices for Wakeford Investment Enterprises? Our records reflect that all outstanding invoices are paid to date. We go up. There's yourself writing to Mr. Wakeford. Can you please, before the July 2010 account, or could you please forward the July 2010 account? It seems it has now been received. Carlos will, on receipt, expedite the payment. And then at the top...
Sorry, you said it seems it has now been received. It seems it has never been received.
It seems it has never been received. Very well. Go to the top. He writes back, Angelo, you did acknowledge receipt. TED, please resend. So we turn over the page. Let's read all of it together. Let's look at this on a conspectus. Page 191. That is only one email that appears, only one message. Kevin is writing to you. He says, hi, Angelo. Any conclusion on my July 2010 catch-up payment? If there are any matters that I'm unaware of, please let me know. No offense. Kind regards. Nothing further to read up there. Let's go to 005. This is from Kevin to Ted, and this is the one to his attorney. Ted, what is going on? The attachment is for Vulshango, not for Bosasa? Question mark. You sent everything out yesterday to all concerned. This is embarrassing. Regards, Kevin. These are the three invoices, sorry, the three emails that you referred us to at page 990. You said, see attached, KW 003, 4, and 5. I've just taken you to it. Emails that depict the dire situation of Kevin Wakeford's financial system that caused delayed payments. Reflects Angelo Agrizzi's attempts to resolve matters. I put it to you that nothing we read in those three annexes bears out what you referred the chairman to a few moments ago, Mr. Agrizzi. Your answer, please.
Sorry, I have to elaborate on this. If you would like to turn to page 196, Chairperson, so I can answer it in correct context. If we can go right back. See, Chairperson, I'm sorry I have to do this, but it is quite evident that, you know, that only certain things are told to you. Look at 209. There's the first one of the emails that I happen to have on the system from Melanie Herman, the assistant bookkeeper, right? And you will see, Chairperson, it goes back now to page 206, all right? And it says there, please find the March 2011 invoice done on behalf of Ted Craig. Good day. Attached, please find the March 2011 invoice done on behalf of Ted Craig.
Yes. That's an email from Melanie Hammond to yourself, and she is copying Mr. Wakeford, is that right?
That is correct, Chair.
Okay.
Right? So then it says, March invoice leading prospect trading, which was Lindella. It says, Kevin sends me the email. He says, this was sent to you yesterday from a new accounting email. Not sure whether you opened it. Right? Okay, and there's the invoice for that, and it says January Consulting, 100,000 Rand.
To whom was it addressed?
To Leading Prospect Trading, 111, which is Lindella. It's 114,000 Rand, and it says January invoice, and there was a VAT amount added to it. Then you will see there was a further invoice called July invoice attached. That is on 206.
Okay, Mr. Agrizzi, this response is meant to show what?
What I'm trying to show you, sir, is that Ms. Advocate Willis is not disclosing absolutely everything. He's cherry picking certain aspects of the file, and we're going to get to a section. If you remember, my argument was that the accounts were in such a disarray that we did not know what was happening.
Yes, but the last question that he asked you.
Yes.
Yes. Do you remember what that question was? Mr. Willis, I'm not sure. I just want to see whether referring to these invoices and emails answers your
Mr.
question.
Chairman, just to remind you, Mr. Agrizzi sought to make out an argument that Mr. Wakeford's financial system, it's his system that caused the delayed payments. Called it a dire situation, page 990. And then he referred to those three emails, 003, 004, 005, which he relied on.
Okay, so it is about the...
Yes. So then he relied on them. Then I said, let's go there. We looked at them.
Okay. No,
and I then put it to him that they do not demonstrate what he says here.
Yes.
He then said to me, and he's now repeated it, that he's now summed it up, I'm cherry picking, and he then took us on some sort of I don't know what you would call it, but a hop, skip and jump through some pages.
Yes.
And I don't understand what he said, but I would put this to him, and that is that he still has not demonstrated any evidence to show that Mr. Wakeford's financial system, as he calls it, was in a dire situation and caused the delay.
Okay, no, that's fine. Mr. Agrizzi, now I understand. What you are doing is going to certain emails and invoices to show, as far as you are concerned, that Mr. Wakeford's financial system was problematic.
Was a mess.
Wasn't a mess, right? Because,
okay. Let's go right down to, it starts on 195. It says, just spoke to doctor. It seems the auditors are now okay with the certificate. Right? And then if you look at it, then Kevin Wakeford writes to me, he says, Angelo, just for your information, my company does not fall into the independent contractor category. I'll just read it again. It says, he writes back to me, and he says, Angelo, just for your information, my company does not fall into the independent contractor category. And he goes and explains it. What I'm getting at, Chair, is if you look at the beginning of my email, or let's say the end of my email, rather, the chain of emails, on 193, I was actually trying to help Mr. Wakeford sort it out. And there it specifically says that I think doctor is getting old. And it was because Dr. Smith did not want to pay him that there was delays.
Okay.
Because of his accounting records that weren't satisfying Dr. Smith.
Okay.
And that is how I tried to resolve it. So for Mr. Willis to say that I purposely withheld and all that stuff, it's all nonsense.
You pointed me on page 990, to paragraph 51, see attached KW 003004005. Can you tell me where else, either in your affidavit or even in your oral evidence, that you explained this new concoction of the doctor and that he now was not happy with something, and he was the cause of, well, he held Mr. Wakeford accountable to something, and that was the cause of the hold-up. And
Is this my affidavit?
I don't know. Yes, this is your affidavit. This is your
So
affidavit.
surely you would have studied it? I wouldn't have had to explain it to you. You charge your client, you would have studied it?
Mr. Chairman, I'm not going to justify that with an answer, but the facts will speak for themselves. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So you can't dispute either that over 107 months of contract period, Mr. Wakeford or his closed corporation was paid an average of 51,000 Rand a month, excluding VAT. Can you?
I can't dispute the actual amounts, no.
And you cannot dispute that he cannot prove that Mr. Wakeford was paid 100,000 Rand a month to manage Mr. Papadakis and in resolving any major SARS investigation.
Okay, all right. Mr. Agrizzi?
Chairperson, I'm just going to refer back to my original statement, and I'll also add in there on page 203, there's an amount for 100,000 Rand, and there's one or two more. So that's my answer.
I'm just going to put, yes, you know what the version is. He was paid 100,000 Rand in catch-up payments. And what you did was, in catching up, there was a period of, I think, approximately 12 months where he had not been paid, and then you double paid. He invoiced it, and you double paid him to make catch-up. That's what all the emails speak to, Mr. Agrizzi.
That is your version.
That's the evidence. Thank you, Mr. Agrizzi. That's your answer, I gather. Now, let's try and finish this up. We'll turn to the Lindela issue. Your main version regarding Lindela is this, as I understand it. In 2005, you were involved in the conclusion of the first contract in relation to the Lindela facility with the Department of Home Affairs, correct?
Carry on, yes.
Just answer the question. Don't give me directions. Yes.
Yes,
Yes,
carry on.
yes.
Unfortunately, Mr. Chairman, it's the disrespect the witness shows, the process, not just me, but the process that makes it difficult. Mr. Agrizzi, the Lindela story starts in 2005. You were party to negotiating that Lindela contract with the Department of Home Affairs for that facility. You said yes to that. And then in the period, for a 24-month period, there was a turnaround at the Department of Home Affairs just before the elections in 2009. That period was May 2007 to April 2009. One of the things that Home Affairs wanted was to renegotiate that contract with Bosasa. Correct. There must have been a first addendum somewhere along the line, but it precedes this event. You may know about it. It's not material, because what resulted from those negotiations was a second and third addendum.
Yes.
Correct. Yes. And one of the members of the negotiating team was Mr. For the Department of Home Affairs was Mr. Radhakrishna. Mr. Wakeford had been appointed...
Sorry, can I correct you? He was the only person I negotiated with. There was nobody else.
Well, I put it to you that that's not what Mr. Wakeford informed the Commission. I'm sure that version suits you, but that was disputed by Mr. Wakeford. Can you prove that to us? Did you gather any documentation from the Department of Home Affairs, any of its records? Did you put anything up to maybe prove that?
I don't have any access to any documentation whatsoever.
You made very serious allegations against these men, and you have no evidence to bear it out. Surely you did some homework.
I provided all the evidence to the investigating leaders, to the Hawks, and to the National Prosecuting Authority.
Now, Mr. Wakeford, as the Learned Commissioner knows, had been appointed by the Minister at the time as the turnaround advisor. He told the chairperson that he fully disclosed to the chairperson, to the Minister, that he at that time had also had a consultancy contract with Bosasa, and the Minister was happy with that.
Yes.
He had 7 work streams and 55 projects. It was an award-winning endeavor internationally. He told the learned chairperson about what that turnaround was all about. But your allegation against is to attempt to link him and Mr. Radhakrishna by saying that Mr. Radhakrishna was captured somehow by Bosasa through Mr. Wakeford and negotiated benefits for Bosasa.
Yes.
You say only two things. You say there was an extension and you loosely refer to other benefits, but you put up no evidence of that, none that I've seen. Mr. Wakeford comes back and puts up evidence and information pertaining to the project, Department of Home Affairs, Lindela facility. He explained it to the learned chairperson, and he demonstrates that there never was an extension. What was negotiated for the benefit of the Department of Home Affairs was that they in the future, at their election, could extend the contract if they wished, if they elected, and they never did. Now, I put it to you, your allegation of an extension is objectively, verifiably false.
You put it to me, but I deny it. I think you.
But can you?
Absolutely. You're making conjecture. I can prove everything to you.
Please, can you demonstrate from these records before the learned chairperson that there was an extension?
Yes.
Can you show me where the Department of Home Affairs exercised its right to extend? And that would have happened in the future. Sorry.
Chairperson, now answer the question.
Please.
Yes, you may answer the question now, Mr. Agrizzi.
Chairperson, the contract is still in process, it's still continuing to today as we speak. The contract was still in operational in 2019, 2020. So it was extended. The contract term was extended naturally. It just continued progression. The facts that I provided, Mr. Advocate Wills is not being totally transparent with the Commission here. The facts I exposed was that Anil Radhakrishna was being paid through Distinctive Wine, and Mr. Noche raised it in Mr. Wakeford's testimony. Very interesting, Mr. Wakeford then turned around and said, well, Mr. Anil Radhakrishna must answer that, but yet he relies upon that evidence in protecting or providing an answer in this matter here. But he actually said that I don't want to rely on Mr. Radhakrishna, I must go back to Mr. Radhakrishna. So Mr. Wakeford needs to explain that.
So what I want to put to you is that your version stands to be pitted against the records and the reports of the Department of Home Affairs. That's where the answer lies, isn't it?
Chairperson, if you'd like me to explain it, very simple. I explained in my document, in my statements, Chairperson, that 7 million rand was promised to Mr. Anil Radhakrishna. Sometime during 2020, he actually came to my house, very upset because Gavin wouldn't pay him the balance of his money. All right, there's an email to that effect. All right, that is as part of the documents and the bundle as well. That is the facts. That's what I attested to. I didn't just attest to two facts, as alluded to by Advocate Willis. I gave a whole string of events, whole string of facts, proved the facts that Anil Radhakrishna, Kevin Wakeford and Gavin Watson had come to an agreement that they would make sure that Lindela would be profitable enough and be able to pay not only Mr. Wakeford and everybody else, Mr. Krishna 7 million rand as well. Advocate Willis, the facts of the matter is I gave my testimony, my statements are there, the facts are there, the payments to Distinctive Wines are there. That's the facts.
Thank you. We'll let the facts speak for themselves. Let's move on. Mr. Agrizzi, you told the Commissioner that you came to a decision to come clean, as you put it.
Yes.
So you weren't clean before. And that was apparently made in December. That was apparently made in December 2016 while you were lying in a hospital bed. Is that correct?
That is correct.
You then waited 2 years before doing that, before coming to this commission. Why didn't you at the beginning of 2017 take everything, Hawks, Crimes Unit, why didn't you come clean?
Mr. Advocate Willis, and I'm going to explain it. Maybe I need to explain a little bit more depth so that you understand. We tried very hard to speak to various people. Unfortunately, and the recordings have been played, where it was quite evident that Gavin Watson had captured the then president. The highest echelons within the justice system in South Africa had been captured. You've seen that. I'll give you a simple example. We submitted, when there was a death, we submitted detailed affidavits to the Hawks. It came back with no action taken. We tried to report it to everybody. We finally reached out in a newspaper release that we sent out, that in the newspaper release we said, listen, we need to open this thing up. And that is when Frank Dutton approached us and started to work with us at the Commission and assured us that the Commission was the right way to go. That happened, Chairperson, and I put extensive affidavits in about it, and Mr. Willis must be aware of it. Then what happened was, after we had put out the newspaper article and the news report, what happened was we were then approached on the Thursday night, the Friday night.
Are you sure? You have a very specific memory to that, Mr.
I do, because it was very traumatic. Sorry, Chairperson.
Let him continue, Mr. Willis.
On the Thursday night and on the Friday, the whole day, they made an offer to us. First, they made an offer. The very first offer was they have an estate called Royalston Wildlife Estate in Port Elizabeth. It had been through a lot of trauma with Kevin Eek and Chicky Watson, and now it was taken over by Valence Watson and the Watson family, and they wanted me to market through an estate agency that I'd opened up that time, and I would have sole mandate to market the Watson's properties at Royalston Estate. I refused that point blank. In the meeting at my house, I actually said to Ronnie Watson, Valence Watson, Brian Bibak, who was the attorney at that time, and Jared Watson, who was there, and Andries van Tonder, that I would have nothing to do with the Watsons, and I asked them to leave. They left at about 1:30 in the morning, Chairperson. The next morning at 9:30, Valence Watson and Jared Watson were at my doorstep. They were asking that I consider a 50 million rand offer to the whistleblowers to keep quiet, to walk away, to turn around. My instructions to Andries van Tonder was go and solicit a recording so that I could get Jared and Valence Watson to sign this agreement. It's all in my testimony. Chairperson, that is when on the Friday night, they came and they recorded me. And then on the Saturday, I then wrote a letter back to them to say, thank you very much. And I think the letter goes to the extent of, you must have taken me for a fool, but I will not sell my soul ever again. That is what happened.
Thank you, Mr. Agrizzi. That's your answer. I was obliged to put that to you.
Thank you.
Can I just ask, you said you approached the Hawks, I think, gave them statements or affidavits. Around about when was that?
Chairperson, if I'm not mistaken, I'll get the file, but I think it was about 2018. I think beginning 2018, around there. And it was specifically because there'd been a death of, Richard LaRue, who testified there. His brother-in-law died very strangely, and he was working with an investigator that Gavin Watson had employed. Okay. The guy passed away on the Friday, and I give my testimony. And what happened was that the family was called in on the Monday, and they were told, here's the invoice, we've paid for the cremation of him. His name was Chris Harris. So they then told to cremate him.
Okay.
That is what happened, Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just want to put it to you, though, that you didn't answer the question. You've explained nothing, Mr. Agrizzi.
Your question again was?
I'm just putting it to you, have not answered the question. I'm not putting the question to you again.
That's fine.
According to your oral evidence, there was a meeting held at your home on the 12th of November 2017. Present was Mr. Andries van Tonder, Liam van Tonder, Frans Forster, Richard LaRue. They all prepared affidavits. You recall that?
Yes, I do.
Mr. Piet Venter. You know Mr. Piet Venter's affidavit speaks extensively to this. Okay. He says, in fact, that you, and you'll remember the debate around this in evidence, says you compiled his affidavit. He just had to put his personal information in it. And of course, where once before Mr. Piet Venter and you were on good terms, he fell off the bus, so to speak, at some stage, and you are not on good terms anymore, correct?
Chairperson, my answer to that is I'm not on good terms with him at all, and he was caught out lying on a few occasions. Thank you.
Thank you. And so those affidavits prepared were on the 12th of November 2017. And in fact, you confirmed in evidence you recall that meeting vividly. I have it. Yes. You remember giving that evidence?
Yes.
You seem to be getting better as the day goes along. It's a pity we never had more time.
Really?
But anyway, let's move along. The point is that, and now I'm having to page through and just get past a lot of material I'd love to have debated with you, but if we go to page 1081, and that would have to be in bundle B, Mr. Chairman. I put it to you, this is a letter from your attorney at the time, Mr. Daniel, and still is, Mr. Daniel Witz. It's addressed on behalf of you, Andries van Tonder, Leon van Tonder, and Frans Forster, and it's a request that was sent to BOSASA whereby your grouping, those names, wished for BOSASA to cede its catering contract with the Department of Correctional Services to yourselves. Now, this is 1 month after 2017. You can see the date of the email, the 15th of December 2017. And you're making demand in the terms of this letter to take over the Correctional Services contract. Can you dispute that?
Correct. Correction. We were not making demand. We were asked, and you can contact Brian B. Buck. We were asked to make a proposal, which is what we did.
I would like to then... Thank you. Mr. Chairman, if we can go to 1067. Mr. Chairman, this is the game plan. This document was put up by Mr. Piet Venter. It was aired on carte blanche. And what it comes down to is a step-for-step plan to destroy BOSASA if BOSASA could not be hijacked, including, if it was necessary, to put it into liquidation and thereafter seize the aforementioned contract with the Department of Correctional Services. You're aware of this game plan.
I don't know what game plan you're talking about.
You don't know this game plan at 1067.
What I can tell you is you're 100% right. Debbie Sankiri Governor on carte blanche did interview Piet Venter. She also interviewed myself. She looked me in the eyes and she said, Angelo, I believe you. That tells you a lot about Piet Venter's statement here.
In fact, if you go to 1088,
yes,
this is an email by yourself.
Yes.
It's addressed, that has been redacted to protect the person you address it to. You say, thanks for the interest and effort.
Yes. Prof. Nass.
And you,
yes.
One can read it, I don't have the time. But then you say this.
Chairperson, can we please deal with it as Mr. Advocate Reg Willis has referred to?
Can you please, Mr. Agrizzi, you are attempting to waste my time. Will you please?
Let Mr. Willis complete, Mr. Agrizzi.
I want you to turn to the second page on 1089. Bearing in mind, this is now 3 months after, it's about 3 months since the last email, so there was the 12th of November 2017. You draw up all of these affidavits. They've all served before the Commissioner. He'll know what they deal with. Incidentally, Mr. Commissioner, the additional bundle 4B contains a collection of all of those affidavits. There's no time to go to them. But those were predominantly, not all, predominantly prepared on the 12th of November 2017. I've taken you to Mr. Witz's email, Danny Witz's email on behalf of them, which was a month later in December. And now this is 3 months later, and this is an email. And if you go to page 1091, and if you go to 1089, it's Mr. Chairman, the third paragraph down, Mr. Agrizzi, it reads, so I also doubt the banks are going to let African Global pass the liquidity test. So, from what I hear, Gavin is doomed if he doesn't get in a rescue team such as us. More so than if he does. And chances upsetting the likes of Papa and Jackie, who won't have a job come August 2018 anyway. Next paragraph. So the answer is simply, as we were advised today, we will wait till the business is liquidated and pick up the contracts by offering assistance during the process. That's if Gavin doesn't relinquish the business as this stage. That way, I am also released from any restraint, something that has kept me from pursuing other ventures in catering. One of the reasons I wanted to get involved.
Yes.
Now, that's that. We turn then to...
That has got to be the last question, Mr.
It is indeed, Mr. Chairman. 1109.
Yes.
And here you are, the 19th of March, 2018.
Yes.
And what this demonstrates, 4 months after those affidavits had been commissioned in November 2017, you are requesting to return to BOSASA and wanting re-employment. Now, and what I'm putting to you is that you, Mr. Agrizzi, long before this commission came along, and after you were supposedly going to come clean, devised a scheme by way of which to destroy BOSASA if you couldn't take it over, including leaving it or ensuring that it goes into liquidation. If one has regard to the game plan, it sets out precisely how you would blacken its name, much like we've seen in the case of the Guptas and others, where the banks shut their accounts, etc., etc. Your objective was to take this company and its balance sheet over. That is what your motive was. When you approached this commission, that is what your motive was. And when you came and proffered a story that your life was in danger and that you were a whistleblower, you were misleading the chairman. And you have misled this commission in many respects, but certainly in respect of Mr. Wakeford, Mr. Papadakis, Mr. Radhakrishna, ever since you gave evidence.
Chairperson, could you please, I'm disputing absolutely everything he's saying. I'm going to go back to his own documents, 1088. And it's a letter that I've written. I don't know why they redact it, because right at the top it says, email from Agrizzi to Martin Nasser. Agrizzi either wishes to take over AGO with Prioris team or see it liquidate. So I don't know whose comments that is. However, I'd like to refer you to paragraph 3, Chairperson.
Yes.
I understand, this is myself writing to Professor Nasser, and if I can give you a bit of context, we were asked to put together a proposal for the regeneration of AGO so that it would not be a politically aligned company, which is what created the problem all along. We were asked to do this. I then sent it to Professor Nasser. Professor Nasser sent it through to Macmillan at Horton University, one of the leading universities in the world, to understand the proposal of Prioris. It was a lengthy portfolio document. Here I say, I understand Gavin's quandary and trying to deal with a defunct and a volatile board. Perhaps that is why we try to make a suggestion. We speak to the board individually in terms of a strategic plan. But having said that, it seems the problem is somewhat larger. I then want to go on to Mr. Advocate Willis's page as well. Just further down, it says, I understand that opportunities do exist outside the borders, but my intention was never to work together with Gavin and his board. It wouldn't serve any purpose. The intellectual base resides with the team at Prioris. I then carry on and I say, the initial idea was that we looked at doing a comprehensive takeover of the business unit known as African Global. And that's what we said. There was nothing untoward about it. We were asked to give our input into how do we regenerate a company that was smothered with corruption and smothered with cash that was being paid out and that people weren't happy with that, Chairperson. And that was our only intention, was to come to the Commission because we'd all been tainted with corruption. And quite honestly, simply given the facts, please just make the decisions or the judgment on the facts of the matter, on was there gratification paid to people, yes or no. Let's take out, I know I've been lambasted for talking too much. I know I've been lambasted for saying it as it is. Chairperson, quite simply, the facts are the facts. Did people get gratification and did we report on that gratification? There was no agenda. That is all I have to say. Thank you very much, Chair.
Is that, Mr. Agrizzi, how you came clean? Is that your explanation for how you came clean?
Thank you. I think he responded to your question the way he did, Mr. Willis. Let's end it there for...
Mr. Chair, the problem is he rambled on, but is that his explanation for how he came clean?
Oh, but I said to your last question, the previous question was the last question.
Please. Mr. Chairman, yes. The facts will speak for themselves.
Yeah.
Mr. Chairman, I don't know what other opportunities we're going to get to speak to you face to face.
You certainly are going to get the opportunity of making written submissions.
Indeed, sir.
And I would like you to start working on them shortly, but I would like you to start like yesterday, working on them. That's a
very encouraging indication. Thank you. Mr. Chairman, thank you for your indulgence.
Thank you, Chair. I won't be longer than a few minutes just to re-examine just 4 short aspects. The first aspect, Mr. Agrizzi, just in re-examination, other than the people that you mentioned, did you approach any other authorities before you landed up at the State Capture Commission? Did you see anybody at the national director or any other person? Just tell us briefly.
Yes, Advocate Wits, I did. I consulted with Mr. Billy Hofmeyer after the Hawks sent back the documents to say there's nolly process, they're not going to even look at it.
Right.
I went to Mr. Billy Hofmeyer at the NPA offices.
With the information and documents?
Yes.
And he didn't assist you?
He said he can't help. The NPA was in disarray.
And did you speak to, which year was this?
It was 2018, 2009. Yeah, 2018, 2019.
And after him, did you speak to anybody else from Justice? Anybody come and visit you? From
nobody.
From the DA party?
Yeah, from DA, I spoke to the previous senior prosecutor, Glynis Breitenbach, to try and help us, give us advice on what to do. She gave me some backstreet attorney to use and it wasn't very good.
And that's how you landed up with that attorney and with the counsel that was assisting you, is that correct?
Eventually what happened, Chairperson, was, I don't know if you know the story, I ended up with an attorney that we paid, I think, 1.5 million rand to, and he didn't even provide us with a document to come to the commission. It was very disconcerting, very disheartening, and then that's when the commission helped me.
Right, now very, very simply, dealing with only the South African Revenue Services investigations, and I want to deal specifically with CARC. What amount of money did the SARSA receive in regards to a tax write-off, approximately?
130 million.
138 million rand.
That's right.
Assessed tax loss. Were they entitled to that tax loss?
Nope.
Who assisted in arranging that rebate and remittance from SARS?
That was Gavin Watson and Petrus Venter and Daniel Erasmus, and they paid people, some other people off within SARS. I don't know who. That's why I've never.
And the SARSA received that assessed tax loss for the prawns that supposedly moved from Port Elizabeth to Krugersdorp.
Correct.
Right.
They even falsified. I gave all the evidence in my document.
Right. The next aspect that I just want to ask you, and ask you to confirm, during the period 2006 to 2015, in regards to Mr. Wakeford, it appears on his own evidence he received 97 payments totaling 6,502,783 rand and 1 cent. Do you confirm that from the record? That is what he's put forward from that period of time.
Correct.
And that was as a consultant.
Sure.
And the essence of his work, other than consultancy and other than SARS matters, what else did he assist with in one sentence?
He went to banks, meetings at the banks, and explained to them about the third pillar and the fourth revolution and all that stuff to try and butter up what corruption was in SARSA.
Right. Now, I'm just turning to one further aspect, please, Mr. Agrizzi. I noticed that wet cement came from WG Wern and dry cement was purchased from RTC, which is Randfontein Trading Centre, which doesn't exist anymore. There were two types of cement, the wet and the dry. And according to the records, Earth 361 Meyersdal, an eco estate, in the name of a trust of which Mr. Papadakis was one of the trustees, and his ex-wife, during that period, 2008 to 2009, lesser credit, 205,734 rand and 25 cents cement was delivered to that premises.
And it was probably more.
No, just stick to those figures that we've got.
Yeah.
The next aspect that I want you to just deal with is a very, very simple aspect, if you can. That is in regards to the payments to Mr. Radhi Krishnan. We know that he was employed at the time through Fever Tree, his consulting company, to assist Home Affairs with the Lindela addendums and extensions. That's correct. And I noticed that 2,109,000 was paid to a Distinctive Choice Wine Company, of which 1,821,600 rand was paid over directly to Mr. Radhi Krishnan. Do you agree with those figures?
That is correct.
And also during the period 30th of November 2009 to 2011, another 1,132,000 rand was paid to Akili Management Services, also belonging to Mr. Radhi Krishnan.
That is correct.
Now, just finally, in regards to Lindela, Mr. Wakeford has put together a very sophisticated document, if one can call it, setting out facts, figures, and numbers. I want you to just tell us very, very briefly. According to him, there was a dramatic saving to the Department of Home Affairs, and everything suited Home Affairs, and that's the reason why they continued with the Lindela contract. Please tell the Chair, what was the real truth behind that? Were there any savings or were there not any savings?
Mr. Chairman, I rise very slowly to my feet, and I've been very patient listening to this questioning. None of it is in the nature of cross-examination. This is an abuse. This is an abuse, and now Mr. Agrizzi is getting an opportunity to now talk. I object to these questions, Mr. Chairman.
That's my last question. It's not an abuse. It's a simple re-examination on 4 aspects relating to who he reported it to. That's aspect number 1. What Mr. Papadakis received in regard to
talk
cement.
about this, the last question. What was the last question again?
The last question is very, very simple. Mr. Wakeford put together affidavits and documentation to show that in this regard, Mr. Radhikrishnan and or any other persons played no part in regards to the Lindela contract with Pasasa, because they showed this huge saving, which Mr. Wakeford was very, very proud to blow his own trumpet, how they were saving Home Affairs. And what I'm asking Mr. Agrizzi, he worked intimately and was intricately involved with Lindela. Was there a real saving, or how did it work?
Okay, that's a legitimate
That's the last question. Thank you.
Okay. What is your answer,
Mr. And tell us in a nutshell, please.
What's your answer, Mr. Agrizzi?
Chairperson, there was no saving. The figures that are reflected in the file are fictitious, and they don't reflect the actual trading results of Lindela. They only show the income statement. They don't show the cost. What they did was at Lindela, they hid all the costs through property rental and properties, the properties company, and it was all siphoned out like that. In terms of saving the department costs, no, they did not save, because what they saved on having in people in Lindela, the 800,000 Rand a month, they spent 3 times as much on transporting illegal immigrants out of the country, because they needed to get them out there quicker so that they wouldn't stay in the detention facility. And that's why the profits rose substantially. And I think at one stage we were doing 65% profits at Lindela. It was a scheme created by Angelo Agrizzi, and he's very bright, and that's why he got paid the money he got paid.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Agrizzi. Thank you, Chair. I'm indebted to Chair and
Yes.
to my learned friends for that time. I've got no
Yes.
further questions for Mr. Agrizzi. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. Mr. Pretorius, you don't look to me like somebody who had any questions, and maybe there's no...
I have no questions.
You have no questions, yeah. Mr. Agrizzi?
Chairperson, I'd just like to thank you.
Yes.
I'd like to thank the Commission Chairperson. Chairperson, we did it for the right reasons, despite everything that's happened to us. And all the guys, it's sad, but unfortunately, but I'll tell you one thing, we did it for the right reasons. And various people have given testimony, Chairperson, of what transpired at Pasasa. It's in books, there's flagrant abuse that is taking place, and I will avail myself at any time.
Yes. No, thank you very much, Mr. Agrizzi. I want to thank you once again for having availed yourself in the condition you are in terms of your health, and for having been able to say we could continue and finish. So thank you very much. And I accept that you have said that if you are needed, you will still avail yourself. Thank you very much. I must also thank you, Mr. Pretorius, and your team. I must thank Mr. Willis and Mr. Wakeford's legal team for your cooperation. Thank you very much. Thank you to the technicians and the whole staff.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. We adjourn.